There is a story, or perhaps it is more of a picture, of a man standing at the edge of a great river. The water is not calm. It is a furious, churning torrent, swollen with rain and rushing towards the sea. The man is drenched, his body weary, his face a mask of desperate effort. He stands with his hands outstretched, pushing against the immense, unceasing force of the water, as if with his own strength he could halt the flood. He strains every muscle, his feet slipping in the mud, his resolve crumbling with each passing moment. The river, of course, does not notice. It simply flows, indifferent to his struggle, a perfect expression of its own nature. We often find ourselves as this man, standing by the rivers of our own lives, trying to hold back the current with our bare hands. We push against the flow of the economy, trying to will our fortunes into existence. We push against the opinions of others, desperate to control how we are seen. We push against the aging of our bodies or the illness of a loved one, a desperate, painful struggle against the inevitable. We push against the relentless tide of news, of world events, of circumstances far beyond our command, and the result is always the same. We become exhausted, soaked in our own anxiety, our spirits eroded by a battle we can never truly win. We live in a state of perpetual struggle, a quiet, grinding tension that becomes the background noise of our existence, a feeling of being stuck in a fight against reality itself. But what if there is another way? What if peace is not found in finally developing the strength to stop the river, but in the wisdom to finally pull our hands away from it? What if we could learn to sit on the bank, to watch the water flow, and perhaps even learn to move with its current rather than against it? This is the beginning of a different path, a path offered by ancient wisdom, a way of seeing the world taught in the quiet halls of Zen monasteries for centuries. It is not a path of conquering the world, but of understanding our place within it. It is a path that begins not by changing the river, but by changing the one who stands beside it. Before we can learn to move with the river, we must first become intimately acquainted with the struggle itself. When we finally stop pushing, when we allow ourselves a moment of stillness on the muddy bank, what is the first thing we notice? It is the echo of the strain in our muscles, the lingering ache of resistance in our bones. It is a deep and pervasive sense of exhaustion, a feeling that goes beyond the physical. It is a kind of spiritual friction, a sense of being fundamentally at odds with the way things are. This feeling, in all its forms, from the slightest irritation to the most profound despair, has a name in the Buddhist tradition. The name is dukkha. This word is often translated into English as suffering, but that single word is like a tiny boat on a vast ocean, unable to convey the full depth and breadth of the concept. Dukkha is not just the agony of tragedy or the pain of a terrible loss. It is also the low-grade, persistent hum of dissatisfaction that so often underlies our lives. It is the feeling that something is just not quite right. It is the itch you can't quite scratch. It is the subtle anxiety of waiting for a message, the disappointment of a meal that doesn't taste as good as you had hoped, the quiet frustration of being stuck in traffic. It is the experience of buying something you have longed for, only to feel the excitement fade, leaving you with a hollow sense of, is that all there is? Dukkha is the gap between reality as it is and our desires for how it should be. It is the friction generated when our expectations grind against the unyielding surface of the present moment. In the West, we are conditioned to believe that this feeling is a problem to be solved externally. If we feel dissatisfied, we are told to get a better job, a bigger house, a more exciting partner, a new hobby. We are encouraged to accumulate, to achieve, to improve, to optimize, constantly striving to close that gap between our life and our ideal of it. Modern life has become a powerful engine for generating dukkha. We scroll through the curated lives of others, highlight reels of perfect vacations, smiling families, and effortless success. And with each image, the gap widens between our own messy, complicated reality and the flawless fantasy on the screen. This creates a pervasive fear of missing out, a sense that everyone else is living a better, more fulfilling life. We are told to find our passion and monetize it, turning the things we love into sources of pressure and evaluation. We are bombarded with advertisements that are masterfully designed to create a sense of lack, to convince us that our happiness is just one purchase away. We achieve a goal, and for a fleeting moment, we feel a sense of relief. But almost immediately, the mind sets a new, higher goal. The satisfaction is temporary, but the underlying striving, the hum of dissatisfaction, remains. This is dukkha in its most common and insidious form. It is the belief that peace is somewhere in the future, just beyond the next promotion, the next relationship, the next accomplishment. But the horizon always recedes as we approach it. To understand this truth more deeply, we can turn to one of the most poignant stories from the life of the Buddha, the story of a woman named Kisagotami. Kisagotami lived a happy life until her young son fell ill and died. Consumed by a grief so powerful it bordered on madness, she refused to accept his death. She clutched the small, cold body to her chest and wandered from house to house, begging for a medicine that could bring him back to life. Some people mocked her, others turned away in pity, but no one could help. Finally, a wise man saw her desperation and directed her to the one person he thought might have an answer, the Buddha himself. Kisagotami rushed to the Buddha, laid her son at his feet, and pleaded for the magical cure she so desperately sought. The Buddha looked at her with immense compassion. He did not dismiss her, nor did he tell her that her wish was impossible. Instead, he said, "There is only one thing. I need to make the medicine that will cure your son. Bring me a single mustard seed from a house where no one has ever died." Kisagotami's heart soared with hope. A mustard seed. That was all. It was such a common thing. Surely this would be an easy task. She began her quest immediately, going to the first house in the village. A young woman answered the door, and Kisagotami made her request. "I would be happy to give you a mustard seed," the woman said kindly. "But in this house, my beloved husband died just last year." Filled with a new sadness, but undeterred, Kisagotami went to the next house. "Please," she begged the man who answered, "I need a mustard seed for a medicine to save my child." The man's face fell. "A mustard seed you can have," he said softly. "But in this house, we lost our parents who were the light of our lives." She went to a third house, and a fourth, and on, through the entire village. At every single door, the story was the same. "We can give you a seed, but here a sister died. We can give you a seed, but here a child was lost. We can give you a seed, but death has visited this house." As the day wore on, Kisagotami's frantic, personal grief began to transform. With each story she heard, her awareness expanded beyond her own pain. She sat by the side of the road, looking at the flickering lights of the village as evening fell. She realized that the sorrow she felt was not hers alone. It was not a unique punishment inflicted upon her. It was the shared, universal condition of being human. Death was not an enemy that had singled out her child. It was a part of the fabric of life itself. In that moment of profound realization, the fire of her desperate clinging was extinguished. She understood. She took her son to the cremation ground and let him go. She returned to the Buddha, not with a mustard seed, but with a mind that was calm and clear. She had not found a cure for death, but she had found a cure for the deepest part of her own suffering. This story beautifully illustrates a crucial distinction: the difference between pain and suffering. The pain of Kisagotami, losing her child, was immense, real, and unavoidable. That is the nature of love and loss. It is a clean wound. The suffering, the dukkha, was the extra layer she added on top of the pain. It was her resistance to reality, her belief that this should not have happened, her story that her pain was unique and unbearable. This is the second arrow we shoot at ourselves. The first arrow is the painful event. The second arrow is our reaction to it, the story we tell, the blame, the resistance, the rumination. Pain is inevitable in life. Suffering is not. Suffering is the story we weave around our pain. We can have pain without suffering. Kisagotami's pain of loss did not disappear, but by accepting the universal reality of it, her suffering was transformed into a deep, compassionate understanding. This is why the first noble truth, the truth of dukkha, is not a pessimistic statement. It is not a declaration that life is miserable and that we should just give up. It is the opposite. It is a diagnosis. Imagine going to a doctor after years of feeling unwell. If the doctor says, "There is nothing wrong with you," you are left confused and without a path forward. But if the doctor says, "I know what this is. There is a name for your condition, and we know its cause," you feel a sense of relief and hope. The diagnosis is the beginning of the cure. The Buddha was like a great physician. By stating, "There is dukkha," he was not cursing life. He was empowering us to heal it. He was giving us permission to acknowledge the dissatisfaction we feel, to see it not as a personal failure, but as a fundamental part of the human condition, as it is ordinarily lived. It is the starting point of our journey. It is the first clue that leads us to the source of the problem. And so, as we sit on the riverbank, having acknowledged the ache of our long struggle, we are now faced with a new question. If this state of dukkha, this friction and dissatisfaction, is the condition we wish to heal, then what is its cause? Why do we feel this constant need to push against the flow? The diagnosis has been made. The next step is to look for the source of the illness. The wisdom of the Buddha points us toward a profound and simple truth, one that is visible in every aspect of our world, yet one we spend our entire lives trying to deny. The primary cause of our struggle is our deep and abiding refusal to accept the true nature of the river itself, that it is always, and in every way, flowing. The physician has made a diagnosis. He has named the dis-ease that afflicts us, this pervasive friction with life we call dukkha, and he has pointed to its source, not as some external flaw in the world, but as an internal resistance within us. A resistance to what? A resistance to the fundamental nature of reality itself. A resistance to the truth that the river is, and always will be, flowing. This universal law of flow, this endless dance of creation and dissolution, is known in Buddhist thought as anicca, or impermanence. To truly understand anicca is to hold the key that unlocks our chains, for it reveals that the solid ground we so desperately seek to stand on has never existed at all. We tend to think of the world as being composed of solid, separate things. We see a table, a car, a tree, a person, a thought, a feeling. We assign them names, and in naming them, we grant them a sense of solidity and permanence in our minds. But this is a trick of perception, a convenient shorthand for a reality that is infinitely more fluid and dynamic. The table you see is not a static object. It is a slow-motion event. It is a vast collection of atoms, vibrating, slowly decaying, constantly interacting with the air, light, and temperature around it. The forest is not a collection of trees. It is a single, interconnected process of growing, breathing, and dying. And most importantly, you are not a fixed entity. The person you were 1 year ago does not exist. The cells of your body have been almost entirely replaced. The thoughts, opinions, and beliefs you held so firmly have shifted, evolved, or been discarded. You are not a noun, you are a verb. You are a process of becoming and unbecoming, a continuous flow of physical sensations, emotions, memories, and consciousness, a river flowing through the vessel of a name. There is a story of a great king who, in his pride, decided to build the most magnificent palace the world had ever seen. He gathered the finest materials, the most skilled artisans, and for years they labored to create a masterpiece of breathtaking beauty. The walls were made of polished marble, the floors of intricate mosaic, the ceilings covered in frescoes, so vibrant they seemed alive. When it was finished, the king was overjoyed, but his joy was immediately tainted by a deep and gnawing fear. He looked at his perfect creation and was struck by the terror that one day it would fade. He issued a royal decree. The palace must remain exactly as it was on the day it was completed. It must never change. And so began the king's descent into a private madness. He employed an army of servants whose only job was to fight a losing war against time. If a single ray of sun faded a patch of paint on a mural, a master artist was summoned to restore it to its original brilliance. If a floor tile showed the slightest sign of wear from the passage of feet, it was immediately prized out and replaced with an identical, new one. If a hairline crack appeared in the marble due to the earth's subtle shifting, the king would fly into a rage, seeing it as a personal betrayal. He never truly saw the beauty of his own palace. He only saw its potential for decay. His life became a constant, exhausting vigil against impermanence. He was a prisoner in his own perfect creation. Meanwhile, a young servant girl in the palace lived in a state of quiet joy. She was not blind to the changes. She noticed the way the morning sun would illuminate the dust motes dancing in the air, creating a momentary, sparkling galaxy in a hallway. She appreciated the smooth, worn texture of a stone railing that had been touched by thousands of hands before hers. She saw the beauty, not just in the palace's pristine state, but in its entire life story, including its inevitable aging. She understood that the palace was not a static monument, but a living, changing place, while the king, who owned everything, was trapped in a hell of his own making. The servant, who owned nothing, was free to experience the simple, fleeting beauty of each moment. We are all, in some way, this king. We fall in love, and, in our bliss, we try to freeze the relationship at its peak, resisting the natural evolution and challenges that all partnerships face. We achieve a moment of success or recognition and desperately try to cling to that status, terrified of the inevitable moment when the spotlight moves on. We look in the mirror and fight a frantic battle against the appearance of wrinkles and grey hair, trying to preserve a version of ourselves that is already gone. This resistance, this clinging fist, is the very mechanism of our suffering. The change itself is not the source of pain. The pain comes from our refusal to accept it. It is the futile pushing against the river. The river simply flows, but our resistance creates the strain, the friction, the ache. The more we value permanence in a world where it does not exist, the more we set ourselves up for disappointment, anxiety, and grief. But here is the secret that the servant girl knew, the secret that transforms this seemingly harsh law into a source of profound liberation. Anika is not a threat, it is a promise. It is the ultimate good news. Because of impermanence, No pain is eternal. The deepest grief you feel will soften. The most intense anxiety will shift. A period of failure or confusion is not a life sentence. It is a season that will pass. If reality were frozen and permanent, there would be no possibility of healing. A mistake would brand you forever. A wound could never scar over. Growth, learning, and forgiveness would be impossible concepts. Anicca is the very law that allows for life to renew itself. It is the reason the forest can regrow after a fire, the reason the sky clears after a storm, and the reason your own heart can mend after being broken. It is the guarantee that this too shall pass. The practice, then, is not to fight impermanence, but to learn to observe it, to become a student of its constant gentle teaching. You can do this right now. Pay attention to your breath. Notice the entire arc of a single inhalation, how it arises, peaks, and dissolves, followed by the pause, and then the rising of the exhalation. Your breath is your personal, portable teacher of anicca, available to you in every moment. When a strong emotion arises, like anger or sadness, try not to immediately push it away or get lost in the story behind it. Instead, just for a moment, see if you can feel it as pure energy in your body. Where is it? Does it have a location, a temperature, a texture? If you simply watch it, without feeding it, you will notice that it too changes. It swells, and then, in its own time, it subsides. It is a cloud passing through the vast sky of your awareness. Go outside and look at an old tree. Contemplate the decades of change it has witnessed and embodied, the seasons of growth and dormancy, the storms it has weathered. It is a testament to resilience, not through rigidity, but through its constant, flexible adaptation to change. By consciously practicing the observation of impermanence, we begin to loosen our desperate grip on life. We start to hold our joys more lightly, appreciating them fully in the moment, knowing they are fleeting, which makes them all the more precious. We also hold our sorrows more lightly, knowing that they too are transient visitors, not permanent residents. We develop a sense of grace and fluidity, learning to dance with the changing rhythms of life, rather than standing rigidly against them. We become less like the frantic king and more like the wise servant, finding beauty not just in the perfect flower, but in the entire cycle of seed, bloom, and wilting petal. This deep investigation of change, however, leads us to a profound and unsettling question. If we look closely, we see that everything is in flux. Our body is a process. Our thoughts are a stream. Our emotions are weather patterns. The world around us is a shimmering, impermanent display. If everything we can point to is constantly changing, then who or what is the one observing all this change? What is this persistent sense of I that seems to be the stable center of all this flux? If the river is flowing, what is this rock that feels the current? If the palace is aging, who is the one who believes he owns it? This sense of a solid, separate self, the one who clings, the one who fears, the one who suffers, is the next great illusion we must investigate. Our journey now takes us from the impermanent nature of the world to the impermanent nature of the self. We have journeyed to the riverbank and acknowledged the deep dissatisfaction, the dukkha, that comes from our struggle against the current. We have looked closely at the river itself and recognized its true nature to be one of constant, relentless change, a flow the sages call anicca, or impermanence. A profound question naturally arises from this seeing. If everything in the world, including our own bodies and minds, is in a state of flux, then who is it that suffers? What is this persistent I that feels so solid, so continuous, the one who stands in opposition to the flow, the one who clings and grieves and fears. We now turn our gaze inward, not to judge or to destroy, but to gently and curiously investigate the nature of this self we hold so dear. In the ancient Buddhist texts, there is a famous and insightful dialogue between a Buddhist sage named Nagasena and the Greco-Bactrian king Melinda. The king, a man steeped in the logical traditions of the West, approached the monk with a direct and fundamental question. Looking at the sage, he asked, "What shall I call you? Who is this Nagasena?" Nagasena, with a calm smile, suggested the king was a delicate man, having come on a hot day in a chariot. He then began a line of inquiry that would gently dismantle the king's entire conception of reality. The sage asked, "Your Majesty, what is this chariot you speak of? Is it the pole that connects to the yoke?" The king replied, "No, revered sir." "Is it the axle then?" "No, revered sir." "Is it the wheels, the frame, the reins, the whip?" To each question, the king gave the same answer, "No, revered sir." Nagasena then leaned forward. Then, "Your Majesty, is the chariot all of these parts combined?" "No, revered sir," the king admitted. "Is it something outside of these parts?" "No, revered sir." The sage then delivered his gentle conclusion. "Then, Your Majesty, though I have asked and asked, I can find no chariot. Chariot is but a sound, a name, a convenient designation for a collection of parts, arranged in a certain way. But in the ultimate sense, there is no chariot to be found." The king was impressed by this logic, but Nagasena was not finished. He then turned this powerful lens of analysis upon himself. He looked at the king and said, "In the same way, Your Majesty, Nagasena is but a convenient designation. It is a name given to a collection of processes. But if you search for a permanent, unchanging Nagasena who owns these processes, you will not find one." This teaching points to one of the most profound and often misunderstood concepts in Buddhism: anatta, or non-self. It is the recognition that the solid, independent self we believe in is, like the chariot, an illusion. What we call me is simply a temporary assembly of constantly changing components. These components are known as the 5 skandhas, or aggregates. They are the parts of our personal chariot. The first is rupa, or form. This is our physical body, with all its organs, senses, and elements. Is this body the real you? It seems so at first, but this body is made of non-you elements. The food you ate, the water you drank, the air you breathe. It is constantly changing, aging, healing, decaying, entirely subject to the law of anicca. You cannot command it to stop aging or to not feel pain. So, this impermanent, uncontrollable body cannot be the permanent, essential you. The second aggregate is vedana, or feeling. These are the raw sensations that arise when our senses make contact with the world, classified as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. A cool breeze on a hot day is a pleasant feeling. A sharp headache is an unpleasant feeling. The sensation of your clothes against your skin is likely neutral. Are these feelings you? Feelings are fleeting visitors. They arise, they linger for a moment, and they pass away. If you were your feelings, you would flicker in and out of existence hundreds of times a day. Your identity would be as unstable as the weather. So, feelings cannot be the real you. The third is sana, or perception. This is the faculty that recognizes, identifies, and labels our experience. It's the part of the mind that sees a collection of colors and shapes and says, "That is a tree," or hears a sequence of sounds and says, "That is my name," or "That is an insult." Is this perception you? Our perceptions are deeply conditioned by our past experiences, our culture, our language, and our current mood. Two people can witness the exact same event and perceive it in radically different ways. Perception is not a clear window onto reality. It is a colored and distorted lens. It is unreliable and ever-shifting, so it cannot be the real you. The fourth aggregate is sankhara, or mental formations. This is a broad category that includes all of our thoughts, ideas, opinions, biases, intentions, volitions, and habits of mind. This is perhaps the part we identify with most strongly. I am my thoughts. But what are thoughts? Watch your own mind for even a few moments. Thoughts arise unbidden, a constant stream of commentary, memory, and fantasy. They are chaotic, contradictory, and ephemeral. Your opinions change over time. Your intentions are often unclear, even to yourself. To claim this turbulent, uncontrolled stream as the core of your being is to build your house on a waterfall. So, your mental formations cannot be the real you. The fifth and final aggregate is vijnana, or consciousness. This is the raw faculty of awareness itself, the light of consciousness that illuminates the other four aggregates. Surely, this must be the real I. But Buddhist analysis reveals that even consciousness is not a solid, independent thing. It arises in dependence upon conditions. Seeing consciousness arises because of the I and a visible form. Hearing consciousness arises because of the ear and a sound. There is no central, overarching consciousness that exists on its own. It is a flickering awareness that is utterly dependent on the objects it cognizes. It, too, is part of the flow. So, like the chariot, when we take the self apart, we cannot find a driver, a CEO, a permanent soul, sitting in a control room. This can be a frightening idea at first. If there is no me, who am I? The self we are deconstructing is what we often call the ego. The ego is the phantom that arises from the mistaken belief that there is a permanent driver in the chariot. It is a thought that believes it is the thinker, and this phantom ego is born in fear. It is terrified of its own dissolution, terrified of the truth of anicca and anatta, and so, its entire life project is to make itself feel more solid, more real, more permanent. It does this by creating and defending a territory. It says, "This is my body, my reputation, my ideas, my possessions." It constructs a fortress of me and mine, and it spends every ounce of its energy patrolling the walls, fighting off perceived threats, and expanding its domain. This fearful, clinging ego is the king in the palace, obsessively trying to prevent decay. It is the man by the river, desperately pushing against the current. It is the fundamental source of our desire to control, because it believes, mistakenly, that its very survival depends on it. To understand anatta is not to annihilate the self. This is not a call for self-destruction. It is a call for liberation. Imagine you have spent your entire life believing you are a single, fragile, precious teacup. You live in constant fear of being chipped, cracked, or shattered. Then one day, you realize that you are not the teacup. You are the vast, open sky in which the teacup appears. You have not been destroyed. You have been expanded. Realizing non-self is like this. It is the release from the cramped, defensive prison of the ego into the open, boundless field of interconnected being. When the hard walls of me begin to soften, something remarkable happens. Defensiveness diminishes because there is no small, fragile self to defend. Empathy arises naturally because the line between my suffering and your suffering becomes blurred. We are freed from the most exhausting job in the world, the constant, moment-to-moment performance and protection of me. We have now looked outward and seen that reality is a river of impermanence, anicca. We have looked inward and seen that the self who watches that river is also a process, a flow, with no solid core, anatta. There is no permanent object and no permanent subject. There is only the flowing, ownerless process of experience itself. With this radical understanding, the whole landscape of our struggle changes. If there is no solid world to control and no solid self to be threatened, then where does our pain and anxiety truly come from? It cannot be the events themselves, for they are just neutral, changing phenomena. It must arise in the space between, in our relationship to those events. It comes from our reaction. It is the story we tell, the judgment we make, the resistance we create. This realization leads us directly to one of the most practical and powerful teachings for daily life, a simple metaphor that can free us from the chains of reactivity. It is the parable of the second arrow. Our journey inward has led us to two profound insights. We have seen that the world around us is a flowing river of impermanence, a process we call anicca, and we have seen that the very self who perceives this world is also not a solid entity, but a dynamic, ownerless process, a truth we call anatta. When these two realizations begin to settle in our hearts, a radical shift in perspective occurs. We begin to understand that if there is no permanent world to control and no permanent self to be harmed, then our suffering must not be an intrinsic part of life's events. It must be something added, something constructed, something that we ourselves bring to our experience. This is perhaps the most liberating and empowering discovery on the spiritual path. The pain of life is inevitable, but the degree to which we suffer is largely a choice. To illuminate this critical distinction, the Buddha offered one of his most powerful and practical teachings, the parable of the second arrow. He taught that when an ordinary person, one who is untrained in awareness, is struck by an arrow, they feel the sharp, physical pain of that wound. But they do not stop there. They immediately begin to grieve and lament. They cry out, "Why was I struck? How terrible is this? What will become of me now?" They become filled with anxiety, resentment, and self-pity. The Buddha explained that this person feels two pains, the initial physical pain and the subsequent mental and emotional anguish. It is as if, having been struck by the first arrow, they immediately take up a second arrow and shoot it into themselves. In contrast, when a wise person, one who is trained in awareness, is struck by an arrow, they also feel the sharp, physical pain of the first wound. They do not deny it or pretend it isn't there, but that is where it ends. They do not add the layer of mental commentary. They do not fall into despair or rage. They do not shoot themselves with a second arrow. They feel only one pain, not two. This ancient parable is a perfect map of our daily psychological lives. The first arrow represents the unavoidable, painful events of existence. It is the critical email from your boss. It is the stock market taking a downturn. It is the diagnosis of an illness. It is a friend letting you down. It is your child failing a test. It is the simple, clumsy act of stubbing your toe. These first arrows are a part of the texture of life. They fly towards us randomly and impersonally. Like the weather, we have very little control over when or where they will strike. The second arrow, however, is the one we fire ourselves. It is our reaction to the first. It is the story we tell, the judgment we cast, the vortex of negative emotion we spin around the initial wound. It is the suffering we create. Let us make this concrete. Imagine you are in a meeting at work and you present an idea you have worked on for weeks. After your presentation, your manager publicly dismisses it as uncreative and poorly researched. The first arrow strikes. It is the hot flush of shame, the tightening in your stomach, the immediate sting of public criticism. This pain is real, sharp, and unavoidable. It lasts for a few moments, a direct impact. For the wise person, the experience might end there. They would acknowledge the sting, breathe through the discomfort, and move on. But for most of us, this is just the beginning. We pick up the second arrow. On the drive home, we start the internal monologue. I am such an idiot. I made a fool of myself. Everyone must think I'm incompetent. That is a second arrow. Then we turn to blame. My manager is a tyrant. He always hated me. He was just waiting for a chance to humiliate me. That is a third arrow. Then we catastrophize about the future. I'll probably get fired now. My career is over. I'll never be respected in this company again. A fourth, a fifth. For days, or even weeks, we can continue to shoot these arrows into ourselves, replaying the scene in our minds, fueling our anger, nursing our wounded pride, and steeping in a toxic brew of our own making. The initial event, the first arrow, was over in a matter of minutes. But the suffering, the second, third, and fourth arrows can last indefinitely. Consider the experience of chronic physical pain. The first arrow is the raw, physical sensation itself. It might be a throbbing in the back, a sharp nerve pain, a persistent ache in the joints. This sensation, while unpleasant, is just that, a sensation. It is a set of signals in the nervous system. The second arrows are the thoughts and emotions we layer on top of it. This is unbearable. Why me? My life is ruined because of this pain. It's never going to get better. This layer of fear, despair, frustration, and identity. I am a person in pain is often far more debilitating than the raw physical sensation. The second arrow of mental anguish amplifies the first arrow of physical pain, creating a feedback loop of suffering. So why do we do this? Why do we so reliably inflict this extra suffering upon ourselves? The second arrow is the ego's desperate attempt to regain control. When the first arrow strikes, our sense of a solid, in-control self is threatened. We feel vulnerable and powerless. The ego cannot tolerate this. To re-establish a sense of agency, it immediately begins to construct a narrative. In this story, the ego gets to be the star, either as the tragic victim or the righteous hero. By worrying, ruminating, and blaming, the ego creates a sense of purpose for itself, a problem to manage. This mental activity feels productive. It feels like we are doing something about the situation, but in reality, we are just digging the initial wound deeper and deeper. The antidote to this self-inflicted suffering lies in the space between the two arrows. There is a moment, however brief, after the first arrow strikes and before we launch the second. It is a moment of pure potential, a sacred pause. And the key to accessing this pause is mindfulness. Through the practice of paying attention to our present moment experience, we can learn to catch ourselves in the act. We can notice the sting of the first arrow without immediately reaching for our quiver. The practice is simple, though not always easy. The next time a first arrow strikes a harsh word, a disappointment, a moment of pain, try this. First, just breathe. Take one single, conscious breath. This simple act can break the circuit of automatic reactivity. It creates a tiny wedge of space. Second, acknowledge the first arrow cleanly. Mentally, you can just name it. This is embarrassment. This is the feeling of anger. This is fear. This is physical pain. By naming it calmly, you are treating it as an objective event, passing through your awareness, rather than being completely consumed by it. You are stepping back and observing it, rather than becoming it. Third, and this is the most crucial step, make a conscious intention not to add the story. Notice the thoughts of blame, self-pity, or fear as they begin to arise, but see them for what they are, just thoughts. You do not have to believe them. You do not have to follow them down the rabbit hole. You can let them be clouds passing in the sky of your mind. This is the act of consciously placing the second arrow back in the quiver. You are not suppressing the pain of the first arrow. You are simply refusing to multiply it. This practice requires patience and self-compassion. We are deeply conditioned to react, and we will fire that second arrow countless times. The goal is not perfection. The goal is to simply begin to notice the pattern. Each time you catch yourself in the act of replaying a hurt or fueling an anger, you have a victory of awareness. Each time you choose to breathe and let go of the story, you weaken the habit of self-inflicted suffering. But what are the deep forces within us that make our grip on that second arrow so tight? What are the twin engines that power this reactive machine? The Buddha identified them with great clarity. They are the fundamental energies of desire, the pull towards what is pleasant, and aversion, the push away from what is unpleasant. To truly be free, we must now turn our gaze upon these powerful, primal forces that shape our every reaction. We stand in the aftermath of the first arrow's impact, holding the second arrow in our hand. We have seen how our own reaction, our own story, is the source of so much of our suffering. Now, we must ask a deeper question. What is the force that so powerfully draws the bowstring back? What is the deep, primal energy that compels us to react, to shoot that second arrow of judgment, blame, and fear? The Buddha, in his profound diagnosis of the human condition, identified this force with perfect clarity. He called it tanha, a word from the ancient Pali language that translates as thirst, craving, or desire. This insatiable thirst, in all its forms, is the engine of our discontent. It is the root cause of our struggle, the second noble truth, the origin of all our self-inflicted suffering. To understand the nature of this thirst, the Buddhist tradition offers a powerful and unsettling image: the realm of the hungry ghosts, or preta. These are beings depicted with enormous, distended bellies, hollow and aching with a cavernous emptiness. Yet, their necks are as thin as a needle's eye, and their mouths are no bigger than a pinhole. They are consumed by a raging, perpetual hunger and thirst, but they can never take in enough to satisfy their vast emptiness. They wander a barren landscape, endlessly searching for something to consume. It is said that when they finally find a drop of clean water, it turns to fire or filth the moment it touches their lips. This is not a literal description of a mythological creature, but a perfect psychological portrait of the human mind caught in the grip of craving. The vast, empty stomach is our deep sense of lack, our feeling of not enough. The tiny mouth is the fleeting, inadequate nature of worldly pleasures to ever truly fill that void. The water turning to fire is the bitter truth that the very things we crave so desperately often bring us more pain than peace. We all have a hungry ghost living within us. This fundamental thirst, tanha, manifests in three primary ways. The first and most obvious is kama tanha, the craving for sense pleasures. This is the thirst for pleasant sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and physical sensations. It is the craving for a delicious meal, the desire to hear praise, the longing for a luxurious comfort, the relentless pull of physical attraction. In our modern world, this form of craving is amplified 1,000-fold. It is the force that keeps us endlessly scrolling through social media feeds, hunting for the next little hit of validation or novelty. It is the compulsive clicking of add to cart, believing that the next purchase will finally bring lasting satisfaction. It is the binge watching of an entire television series in a weekend, seeking to lose ourselves in a stream of stimulating images and sounds. This form of craving is a hungry ghost with an endless buffet, yet it is never, ever full. The pleasure of the last meal fades, the novelty of the new purchase wears off, and the thirst immediately returns, often stronger than before. The second form of thirst is more subtle and cuts much deeper. It is bhava-tanha, the craving for being, for existence. This is not just the basic will to live. It is the ego's profound thirst to become something, to solidify its own existence. It is the craving to be important, to be successful, to be famous, to be seen as intelligent, virtuous, or special. It is the burning desire to leave a mark, to build a legacy, to be remembered long after our physical body has turned to dust. This is the craving that fuels ambition untethered from wisdom. It drives us to protect our reputation at all costs, to defend our opinions as if they were extensions of our very being, and to accumulate status, wealth, and power, not for what they can do, but for what they say about who we are. It is the ego's desperate attempt to make itself permanent in an impermanent world, to shout its own name into the vast, silent universe, hoping for an echo. This craving for being is the source of immense anxiety, for it pits our fragile sense of self against the entire, indifferent flow of anicca, the law of change. The third form of thirst seems like the opposite of the second, but it is merely the other side of the same coin. It is vibhava-tanha, the craving for non-being, for annihilation. This is the energy of aversion. It is the desperate desire for an unpleasant experience to cease. It is the violent push away from reality when it does not conform to our wishes. When we are feeling intense anxiety, this is the craving that screams, "Make this stop." When we are confronted with a personal failure, this is the desire to erase it, to pretend it never happened. It is the anger that rises when we are criticized, the hatred we feel towards those who obstruct our path, the deep frustration with our own perceived flaws. This is the energy that wants to annihilate the feeling, the situation, or even, in its most extreme form, the self that is experiencing the pain. Aversion is not the opposite of craving. It is simply craving for an absence. It is a thirst for a different reality, a reality where the unpleasant thing does not exist. These two forces, desire and aversion, are the twin poles of our reactivity. Imagine your mind is like a pendulum. When a pleasant experience arises, the pendulum swings hard towards desire, towards, yes, more of this, don't let it end. We cling, we grasp, we try to hold on. When an unpleasant experience arises, the pendulum swings just as hard in the opposite direction, towards aversion, towards no, get this away from me, I can't stand it. We resist, we push, we fight. Our entire emotional life can be seen as this constant, exhausting, swinging between grasping and resisting. We are rarely at peace in the center, in the still point of balance, where we can simply allow our experience to be what it is, without the violent push or pull. Both desire and aversion are a rejection of the present moment. Both are a declaration that what is happening right now is not good enough, and so they bind us to a perpetual state of dissatisfaction, of dukkha. How then do we escape this trap? The path is not to engage in a new war, a war against desire itself. To try and violently crush our desires would simply be another act of aversion, another swing of the pendulum. The wisdom of the Buddha points to a more subtle and powerful path, the path of non-judgmental observation. The practice is to begin to see these forces as impersonal energies passing through the mind, rather than as personal commands that must be obeyed. When a craving for something arises, instead of immediately acting on it or condemning yourself for having it, you can simply note its presence. Ah, there is wanting. You can become curious about it. What does it feel like in the body? Is it a tension, a hollowness, an energy pulling you forward? By observing it with this kind of scientific curiosity, you create a space between the urge and your action. You realize you don't have to be its slave. You can watch the wave of desire arise, crest, and eventually pass away on its own. The same is true for aversion. When anger or irritation flares up, instead of being consumed by its fire, you can step back and observe it. Ah, there is aversion. There is pushing away. What does it feel like? Is it a heat in the chest, a clenching in the jaw, a tightening in the shoulders? By simply watching it without adding a story of blame, you refuse to give it more fuel. You let the energy be there without letting it become you. This practice of clear seeing, of patient and kind observation, is the beginning of freedom. It starves the hungry ghost. But to do this, to stand steady amidst the powerful currents of desire and aversion, requires a particular skill. It requires the ability to place our attention in the present moment and hold it there with a degree of stability and clarity. It requires a mind that is less like a leaf blown about in the wind and more like a mountain, aware of the weather changing around it but remaining fundamentally unshaken. This essential faculty, this core mental muscle that allows us to observe our inner world without being swept away by it, is the heart of meditative practice. It is called sati, or mindfulness. To truly master the art of letting go, we must now turn our full attention to cultivating this foundational quality of mind. We have seen the trap, the endless swing of the pendulum between desire and aversion, the primal thirst of the hungry ghost that keeps us in a state of perpetual dissatisfaction. We are caught in a web of our own automatic reactions, forever pulling pleasant experiences closer and pushing unpleasant ones away. To find freedom, we need more than just the intention to stop. We need a tool, a skill, a way of seeing that can cut through the thick cords of habitual reactivity. This master tool, the very heart of Buddhist meditation and the foundation of a peaceful mind, is called sati, or mindfulness. It is the art of seeing clearly, and it is the beginning of the end of our inner war. When people in the West first hear about mindfulness or meditation, they often imagine a state of perfect, blissful emptiness, a mind completely free of thoughts, and so they sit down, close their eyes, and try to force their thoughts to stop. Within moments, they are confronted with a riot of mental activity, planning, worrying, remembering, fantasizing. They conclude, with a sense of failure, "I can't do this. My mind is too busy." This is the most common and tragic misunderstanding of the practice. Mindfulness is not about stopping your thoughts or emptying your mind. The mind's nature is to think, just as the heart's nature is to beat. You cannot and should not try to stop it by force. Mindfulness is something far more subtle and revolutionary. It is about changing your relationship to your thoughts. It is the practice of learning to witness the busy traffic of your mind without jumping into the middle of the street. There is a powerful Zen story about a great master guiding a young student across a deep, treacherous canyon on a single, narrow rope bridge. The student, looking down at the terrifying drop, is frozen with fear. The master gives him simple instructions. Do not look down into the chasm of what might happen. Do not fix your gaze on the other side, on your destination. Let go of both fear and ambition. Instead, bring your entire being, your whole awareness, into this one single step you are taking right now. Feel the texture of the rope under your foot. Feel the subtle shift of your weight. The entire universe, for you, must become this single, present step. By following this instruction, the student is able to cross. Safety was not found by fighting the fear or ignoring the danger, but by anchoring his awareness so completely in the present moment that there was no room left for the mind's fearful stories. This is the essence of mindfulness. It is a radical act of arriving in the here and now. The practice itself is one of cultivating what is called bare attention. It is a gentle, curious, non-judgmental awareness of whatever is happening in your experience right now. It is like turning on a light in a darkened room. The light doesn't try to change or rearrange the furniture. It doesn't judge the furniture as good or bad. It simply illuminates what is already there. One of the most effective ways to cultivate this is through the simple technique of mental noting or labeling. When you notice a strong emotion has arisen, you can mentally whisper its name. Anger, anger. When you feel a wave of sadness, you can note sadness, sadness. When you catch your mind drifting off into a long chain of thought, you can gently label it thinking, thinking. This simple act is profoundly transformative. When you are lost in anger, you are the anger. The emotion has completely consumed your identity. But when you can step back, even for a millisecond, and say, this is the feeling of anger, a space is created. You are no longer the anger. You are the one who is aware of the anger. You have shifted from being the actor in the drama to being the audience. This depersonalizes the experience. It turns a frightening, overwhelming force into a manageable, observable event. It is the difference between being caught in a thunderstorm and watching the storm from a safe and sturdy shelter. While formal sitting meditation is the gymnasium where we strengthen this mindfulness muscle, the true purpose of the practice is to bring this quality of awareness into every moment of our daily lives. You do not need a special cushion or a silent room to practice. You can practice right now. Consider the next cup of coffee or tea you drink. For most of us, this is an automatic activity done while reading emails or planning the day. Try, just once, to turn it into a mindfulness practice. Before you take a sip, pause. Notice the weight and warmth of the mug in your hands. Look at the color of the liquid, the steam rising from its surface. Bring it to your nose and consciously register its aroma. Then, take the first sip and pay full attention to the sensations, the temperature, the taste, the feeling of the liquid in your mouth. You may only do this for the first few sips, but in those moments, you have stepped off the treadmill of automatic habit and entered the reality of the present. You can practice mindful walking by simply feeling the sensations of your feet on the ground as you move from one place to another. Feel the heel strike, the rolling of the foot, the push-off of the toes. This simple act can transform a mundane trip to your car into a moment of centered, calming presence. You can practice mindful listening. The next time you are in a conversation, see if you can offer the other person the gift of your complete, undivided attention. Instead of planning your response while they are talking, simply listen, receive their words. Notice their tone of voice, their body language. You will find that this not only makes you a more compassionate friend or partner, but it also calms your own mind, freeing it from the anxious work of constant rehearsal. As we continue this practice, something remarkable begins to happen. Mindfulness becomes a gateway to direct insight. The great truths of the Buddha's teachings, like impermanence and non-self, cease to be abstract philosophies and become our own lived experience. As you sit and watch your mind, you see for yourself that thoughts and feelings arise from nowhere, linger for a time, and dissolve back into nothingness. You are witnessing anicca in real time. You don't need to believe in it. You see it. You also begin to notice that despite the endless stream of thoughts, there is no thinker to be found. No little person sitting behind your eyes, pulling the levers. You see that thoughts think themselves. You are directly experiencing the truth of anatta, non-self. This direct seeing is what leads to true wisdom and liberation. It is not something you learn from a book. It is something you uncover within your own consciousness. The light of mindfulness, however, does not discriminate. It shines on everything. In its clear, steady beam, we see not only our moments of peace and joy, but also our boredom, our restlessness, our irritation, our grief, and our fear. Mindfulness shows us, without bias, everything that is present in the room of our awareness. This can be challenging. It is one thing to be mindful of a beautiful sunset. It is quite another to be mindful of a wave of intense anxiety. And so, the practice of seeing clearly leads us to our next great task. Now that we can see what is here, in this present moment, can we learn to stay? Can we learn to let it be, without needing to fix it, change it, or run away from it? The art of seeing clearly must be paired with the art of being with. This leads us to the courageous and profoundly healing practice of acceptance. The light of mindfulness is now on. We have illuminated the inner landscape of our minds, and we are learning to see clearly. We see the pleasant thoughts, the joyful feelings, the moments of peace, and we also see the rest, the boredom, the restlessness, the anxiety, the grief. There, in the corner of the room, sits an unwanted guest. Our immediate, deeply ingrained instinct is to get rid of it. We try to argue with it, to ignore it, to distract ourselves, to force it out the door. We spend immense energy trying to eject this guest from our own house. But the more we struggle, the more it seems to resist. The more we fight, the more exhausted we become. The path to peace requires a radically different approach, a practice of immense courage that at first sounds like surrender. It is the practice of acceptance. It is learning to turn to the unwanted guest and with a quiet heart say, "Since you are already here, you are welcome to stay." This idea is often met with fierce internal resistance. Acceptance? Does that mean I should just give up? Does it mean I should approve of this anxiety, this injustice, this pain? Does it mean becoming a passive doormat to life's difficulties? This is a crucial misunderstanding. Acceptance is not resignation, and it is not approval. Resignation is a state of hopeless defeat. Acceptance is a state of clear-eyed realism. Acceptance does not mean you have to like what is happening. It simply means you have to stop arguing with the fact that it is happening. Imagine you are lost in a deep, dark forest. Acceptance is not about deciding to live in the forest forever. It is the simple, vital act of first admitting to yourself, "I am lost in a forest." To deny it, to pretend you are in a sunny meadow, is to ensure you will never find your way out. Acceptance is the act of looking at your map, seeing the "you are here" marker, and only then beginning to plot a wise course forward. There is a story of a Zen monastery built on a mountainside, directly in the path of seasonal typhoons. When the warning for a great storm came, the younger monks would fly into a panic. They would rush about, hammering shutters, tying down roof tiles, their minds filled with anxious visions of destruction. The old Zen master, however, would sit calmly on the open veranda, watching the sky darken and feeling the wind begin to rise. As the storm hit with its full fury, with howling winds and driving rain that soaked the edges of the porch, he didn't curse or hide. He simply smiled, and was heard to say to a frightened student, "Ah, what a wonderful, powerful storm. The world is giving our temple a much-needed bath." The monks were resisting reality, their minds filled with the second arrows of "this shouldn't be happening." The master was practicing acceptance. He wasn't denying the storm's power, but he was meeting the raw, energetic reality of it with openness, rather than with a futile and exhausting internal battle. This points to a profound psychological law. What you resist persists. The energy you expend trying to push away an unwanted feeling is the very energy that sustains it. Imagine trying to hold a large beach ball underwater. It takes a constant, straining effort. Your muscles are tense, your focus is narrowed, and it is utterly exhausting. The moment you relax your grip, the ball doesn't just surface, it shoots into the air with tremendous force. This is precisely what we do with our difficult emotions. We spend our days pushing down anxiety, distracting ourselves from grief, suppressing our anger. This constant inner battle, this holding of the ball underwater, is the source of so much of our chronic tension and fatigue. The feeling itself might be uncomfortable, but our resistance to the feeling is what creates the deep suffering. Acceptance is the simple, courageous act of letting the beach ball float on the surface. It might bob around uncomfortably for a while, but we are no longer at war with it. We have freed up all the energy we were wasting on the struggle. This practice of acceptance is not just an idea, it is a felt experience in the body. It is something we can actively cultivate. When you notice an unwanted guest, a difficult emotion has arrived, the first step is to locate it in your body. Mindfulness has shown you it is here. Now ask, where does it live in me? Is anxiety a tightness in your chest? Is sadness a hollowness in your stomach? Is anger a burning heat in your face and hands? Move your attention away from the story in your head, the why I feel this way, and how do I get rid of it, and bring it directly to the raw physical sensation. The second step is to consciously soften around this sensation. Our instinct is to tense up, to build a wall of muscular armor around the unpleasant feeling. See if you can do the opposite. Breathe in to that area of tightness. Imagine your breath could carry with it a quality of warmth, gentleness, and space. You are not trying to breathe the feeling away. You are trying to make room for it. You are softening the edges of your resistance. The third step is the heart of the practice, to simply allow the sensation to be there. Give it permission to exist, just for this moment. You don't have to like it. You don't have to want it. You simply have to drop the rope in the tug of war against it. You let it be. This is an act of profound bravery and self-compassion. You are telling yourself, whatever is here right now, I am strong enough to be with it. Paradoxically, the moment we truly stop fighting a feeling is often the moment it begins to lose its power over us. When we allow the wave of anxiety or sadness to move through us without resistance, it often dissipates much more quickly, like a storm that is allowed to rain itself out. This practice is the bedrock of wise and effective change. As long as we are in a state of resistance and denial, our actions will be reactive, fearful, and often counterproductive. The activist, who is consumed by rage and hatred for their opponent, often creates more conflict than resolution. The person who denies their financial problems continues to spend recklessly. The addict who refuses to accept the reality of their addiction cannot take the first step toward recovery. Acceptance breaks this cycle. By calmly acknowledging this is the situation, we reclaim our clarity and our power. We are no longer driven by fear and denial. We can now ask the truly important question: given that this is the reality, what is the most compassionate and skillful action I can take right now? Therefore, the combination of mindfulness and acceptance is the foundation for true freedom. Mindfulness turns on the light and shows us what is truly in the room. Acceptance allows us to sit peacefully with whatever we find there. This practice liberates us from the exhausting inner war of resistance, the constant pushing and pulling against the flow of life. But this does not mean we become inert. It does not mean we simply sit back and let the weeds take over the garden of our mind. Instead, it means we can now approach our lives with a new kind of energy. We can put down the weapons of struggle and pick up the tools of a wise gardener. We accept the reality that weeds will appear, but this clear-eyed acceptance is what allows us to tend to the garden with skill, patience, and gentle, persistent effort. This leads us, naturally, to our next step, the cultivation of right effort. Through the gateway of mindfulness, we have stepped into the quiet, spacious room of acceptance. We have learned the courageous art of being with our experience as it is, dropping our resistance to the unwanted guests of sorrow, fear, and pain. In doing so, we have liberated a vast reserve of energy that was previously consumed by the exhausting internal war of resistance. The tug of war is over. The beach ball is floating on the surface. We are no longer at war with the river. A crucial question then arises. What do we do now? What do we do with this freedom, this energy? The path of wisdom does not lead to a state of passive inaction. It leads to a new kind of action, an effort that is not born of struggle, but of clarity. This is the practice of samavayama, or right effort, and it transforms our life from a battlefield into a garden that we can mindfully and lovingly cultivate. To understand right effort, imagine two gardeners. The first gardener is in a constant state of battle. He hates the weeds, seeing them as a personal insult. He curses the lack of rain and despairs when there is too much. He is tormented by insects and anxieties about the harvest. His work is filled with tension, frustration, and a sense of grim obligation. His effort, though immense, is born of resistance, and it drains him of all joy. The second gardener is a wise gardener. She understands that weeds, pests, and unpredictable weather are simply part of the nature of a garden. She accepts this reality without wasting energy on anger or despair. This acceptance does not lead her to inaction. Instead, it allows her to channel all her energy into skillful, patient work. She doesn't curse the weeds, she simply removes them. She doesn't command the rain to fall, she provides water when it is needed. Her effort is calm, consistent, and born of care. She finds a quiet joy, not just in the future harvest, but in the very process of tending to her garden. Right effort is the practice of becoming this wise gardener of our own mind. This wise cultivation is traditionally broken down into 4 distinct, yet interconnected, practices. These 4 efforts provide a complete framework for tending to our inner world. The first is the effort to prevent unskillful states from arising. The wise gardener knows that it is easier to prevent a weed from sprouting than to pull it out once it has deep roots. She might lay down mulch or plant ground cover to create conditions where weed seeds cannot easily germinate. In our minds, this is the practice of guarding the senses. We recognize that certain inputs reliably lead to unwholesome states of mind. Perhaps scrolling through a particular social media feed always leaves us feeling envious and inadequate. Or maybe Listening to angry political commentary always ignites our own rage. The effort of prevention means skillfully choosing not to expose ourselves to these triggers when possible. It is not about hiding from the world, but about wisely managing our mental environment. Just as a gardener manages the soil, we choose to consume media, conversations, and entertainment that are more likely to nourish us than to poison us. The second is the effort to abandon unskillful states that have already arisen. Despite our best efforts at prevention, weeds will inevitably sprout. An angry thought, a surge of jealousy, a wave of greed, these will arise. The frustrated gardener might let them grow, either ignoring them until they become overwhelming, or even feeding them with angry attention. The wise gardener, upon noticing a new weed, gently and promptly removes it before it can go to seed and spread. In our minds, when we use mindfulness to spot an unwholesome state like anger arising, right effort is the practice of skillfully letting it go. This is not a violent suppression. It is a gentle release. We might do this by shifting our attention back to our breath, or by deliberately applying an antidote. If we are consumed by an angry thought about someone, we can intentionally cultivate a thought of loving kindness, wishing them well. This is like pouring cool water on a small fire before it becomes a blaze. We acknowledge the weed, and then we remove it. The third is the effort to cultivate skillful states that have not yet arisen. The wise gardener's work is not just about weeding. That would leave an empty, barren plot. The heart of her work is to actively plant the seeds of the flowers, vegetables, and herbs she wishes to see grow. In our minds, this is the joyful practice of intentionally cultivating wholesome states. We can set aside time to practice gratitude, deliberately bringing to mind the people and conditions in our life for which we are thankful. We can practice generosity, looking for opportunities to give our time, our attention, or our resources without expecting anything in return. We can actively practice compassion and loving kindness through meditation, planting the seeds of a warm and open heart. We are not just passively waiting for peace and joy to appear. We are actively creating the causes and conditions for them to flourish. The fourth and final practice is the effort to maintain and nurture skillful states that have already arisen. When a beautiful flower finally blooms in the garden, the wise gardener does not then ignore it. She makes sure it has enough water and sunlight. She protects it from pests. She delights in its presence, which helps it grow stronger and produce more seeds. Similarly, when a wholesome state arises in our mind, a moment of genuine peace, a feeling of deep focus, a surge of selfless love, we must learn to recognize and appreciate it. Instead of letting it pass unnoticed, we can savor it. We can pay attention to what peace feels like in the body. We can allow the warmth of compassion to fill our awareness. By giving our gentle attention to these positive states, we are watering the flowers in our garden. We are strengthening the neural pathways of kindness and clarity, making it more likely that they will arise again in the future. It is vital to understand that this effort is infused with kindness. The Western mind often equates effort with struggle, with forcing our will upon something, with the no pain, no gain mentality of an aggressive workout. Right effort is the opposite. It is gentle, patient, and sustainable. It is the steady persistence of water flowing over a rock, not the violent explosion of dynamite. When we find a weed in our mind, we don't berate ourselves for being a bad gardener. We simply acknowledge it with self-compassion and gently remove it. The entire practice is one of kindness. This reframing of effort also redirects our focus. We learn to stop wasting our precious energy on the things we cannot control, the weather of the external world. We cannot control other people's behavior, the economy, or the grand sweep of world events. To try and do so is to become the frustrated gardener, cursing the sky. Right effort calls for us to bring our energy back to the one place where it can make a real difference, our own inner garden. This is the only domain we can truly cultivate. This inward turn has a profound consequence. So much of our modern, anxious striving is directed at forcing a particular outcome in the future. We exhaust ourselves not for the love of the action itself, but for the anticipated reward, the promotion, the praise, the victory. Right effort teaches us a more peaceful and effective way. It guides us to place our energy and attention on the quality of the work itself. In this present moment, it is about how we are tending the garden right now. The harvest will come as a natural consequence of skillful, present moment cultivation. This frees us from the tyranny of the future and allows us to find peace and meaning in the process itself. And this leads us directly to our next great letting go, the letting go of our attachment to the outcome. We have learned to be the wise gardener, to accept the nature of our garden, and to apply our energy with gentle, skillful effort. We focus on preparing the soil, planting the seeds of kindness, and removing the weeds of anger and greed. We do this not with the frantic, anxious energy of a gambler desperate for a win, but with the calm, steady presence of one who finds meaning in the work itself. This leads us to one of the most profound and challenging shifts in perspective on the path to inner peace. The practice of letting go of the outcome. In a world that relentlessly shouts that our worth is measured by our results, our achievements, and our victories, the wisdom of Zen offers a quiet, revolutionary alternative. It teaches us that freedom and excellence are not found in the prize at the end of the race, but in the quality of our attention with each and every step we take. Our modern culture is a grand temple dedicated to the worship of outcomes. From a young age, we are taught to be goal-oriented. We study not for the love of learning, but to get the grade. We work not for the satisfaction of the craft, but to get the promotion. We exercise not to enjoy the feeling of a body in motion, but to achieve a certain number on a scale. The present moment becomes little more than a means to an end, a stepping stone to a perpetually receding future, where our happiness supposedly resides. This constant striving, this living for the future, fills our present with a low-grade anxiety and a subtle feeling of inadequacy. We are never quite there yet. The process of living becomes a stressful performance, and we are both the anxious actor and the harsh critic. In the classic book, Zen in the Art of Archery, this very struggle is laid bare. A German professor, representing the logical, goal-driven Western mind, travels to Japan to learn archery from a great Zen master. The professor is a good student. He diligently masters the technical aspects of breathing, posture, and releasing the arrow. Yet, his shots are inconsistent, and the master is unimpressed. The professor is consumed with one thought: hitting the target. His entire being is focused on the outcome. The master tells him, the real art is to not think, not even to aim. Your problem is that you are trying too hard. You are thinking about the goal, and this you is getting in the way. This instruction is maddening for the professor. How can one shoot an arrow without aiming? How can one succeed without trying? The master's guidance seems nonsensical. You must learn to wait, the master advises, in a state of the highest tension, until the shot falls from you like a ripe fruit falls from a tree. For years, the professor struggles with this paradox. He tries to not try. He attempts to force a state of effortlessness, all in the service of his ultimate goal, hitting the target. His attachment to the outcome is the very obstacle that prevents him from achieving it. The breakthrough finally comes, not through more effort, but through surrender. One day, after a practice shot, the master bows deeply. Just then, he says, "It shot," in a moment of pure presence. When the professor had finally let go of his desperate need to succeed, the eye that was trying so hard got out of the way. The action flowed through him, perfect and unforced. The shot was a success precisely because he was no longer attached to succeeding. This story reveals the crucial difference between a healthy intention and a toxic attachment. Intention is our compass. It gives us direction. It is the archer's intention to shoot toward the target. It is the writer's intention to complete their novel. It is the parent's intention to raise a kind child. Intentions provide our lives with meaning and purpose. They are essential. Attachment, however, is a chain. It is the rigid, fearful demand that the outcome must unfold in one specific, predetermined way. It is the belief that our happiness, our self-worth, and our peace are entirely conditional on the arrow hitting the bullseye. Intention says, "I am walking northward." Attachment screams, "I must reach that specific tree by noon, and if I am delayed by even 1 minute, or if I have to walk around a boulder, the entire journey is a failure." Intention guides us. Attachment strangles us and the process. When we are shackled by attachment to the outcome, we cannot be fully present in the action. The joy of the process is stolen by anxiety about the result. The artist who is only thinking about whether their painting will sell cannot lose themselves in the dance of color and form. The musician who is obsessed with the audience's applause cannot truly feel the music they are playing. The speaker who is fixated on appearing brilliant cannot speak from the heart. This is the root of all performance anxiety. It divides the mind, creating a conflict between the part of us that is doing the action and the part that is anxiously judging it. But when we let go of that attachment, we are free to fall in love with the process itself. We can find our satisfaction in the steady sanding of the wood, not just the finished table. We can find our joy in the honest exchange of a difficult conversation, regardless of whether the other person agrees with us. We become like the Zen archer, who discovered that the true art was not in the arrow striking the target, but in the sublime, meditative state of becoming one with the bow, the breath, and the present moment. This leads to a state of being that the Taoists call Wu Wei, often translated as effortless action or non-doing. It is a state of flow where our actions are spontaneous, harmonious, and incredibly effective because they are no longer being impeded by the friction of a striving, anxious ego. We have all tasted this in small ways. The athlete who is in the zone, the writer whose words seem to flow from an unknown source, the programmer who solves a complex problem in a state of absorbed focus. These are moments when the I gets out of the way and it takes over. This state does not arise from giving up or being lazy. It arises when our intention is clear, our skills are honed, and our attachment to the result has been released. It is the ultimate expression of right effort, powerful, effective, and deeply peaceful. The practice, then, is to consciously shift our focus. We still set goals, we still have intentions, we still act in the world, but we train ourselves, moment by moment, to bring our primary attention back to the quality of the action we are performing right now. When we are working, we fully engage with the task at hand. When we are speaking, we fully listen and speak. We set our course by the North Star of our intention, but we find our nourishment and our footing on the path directly beneath our feet. We learn to trust that if we tend the garden with care and presence, a healthy harvest will naturally follow in its own time. We do our part, and we let the universe do its part. This practice of releasing our grip on outcomes brings immense freedom to our personal endeavors. But now we must turn this lens onto one of the most complex and challenging areas of our lives, our relationships with other people. It is here that our desire to control outcomes becomes most entangled. We are constantly, and often unconsciously, trying to manage how others feel, what they think, and how they behave, all in an effort to produce a result that makes us feel safe and validated. Our next step on this journey of letting go is to apply this profound wisdom to the art of releasing others and ourselves from the prison of our expectations. We have taken a great leap of faith, learning to pour our wholehearted effort into the process while releasing our anxious grip on the outcome. We are learning to be the archer who finds perfection not in the target, but in the sublime stillness of the shot itself. This practice brings a profound sense of peace to our personal endeavors. Now, we must turn this liberating wisdom towards the most complex, dynamic, and often most painful arena of our lives, our relationships with other people. Here, our desire to control the outcome runs rampant. We treat our partners, children, friends, and colleagues like projects to be managed or problems to be solved, and in doing so, we create immense suffering for them and for ourselves. The next step in our journey is to learn how to release others from the prison of our own expectations. We are all, to some degree, unwitting jailers. In our minds, we construct invisible cells for the people we love. We write a detailed script for them to follow, a script that serves our own needs, our own comforts, and our own vision of how the world should be. We expect our partner to know what we need without us having to say it. We expect our children to follow a path that we deem successful and safe. We expect our friends to always agree with us and validate our choices. We expect society to conform to our ideals. When people deviate from our script, as they inevitably will, we feel a sense of betrayal, frustration, and righteous anger. How could they do that? We ask. Don't they know how much it hurts me? The bars of this prison are forged from the metal of our own unexamined expectations. There is a beautiful parable that illustrates this truth. A wealthy man adored a songbird with the most beautiful voice he had ever heard. He captured the bird and placed it in a magnificent cage made of gold and inlaid with jewels. He provided it with the finest seeds and the purest spring water. He would sit by the cage for hours, telling the bird how much he loved it and begging it to sing for him. But the bird remained silent. Its feathers grew dull, its eyes lost their light, and it would only huddle in the corner of its splendid prison. The man's love was a form of control, a desire to possess the bird's beauty for himself, and in his attempt to secure it, he destroyed the very thing he loved. Another man also loved the birds, but instead of building a cage, he cultivated a garden. He spent his years learning which trees offered the best shelter, which flowers attracted the most insects, and which fruits the birds loved to eat. He built a small fountain so they would always have fresh water. He did not try to catch the birds or force them to stay. His effort was an open-handed invitation, and so the birds came willingly. They nested in his trees, bathed in his fountain, and filled his garden with their joyous, spontaneous song. Their music was a gift born of their freedom. The first man's love was a cage. The second man's love was a garden. We must ask ourselves, in our relationships, are we building cages or are we cultivating gardens? A cage is when we offer our love with conditions attached. I will love you if you make these choices. It is our unsolicited advice, our attempts to fix people for their own good, our subtle manipulations to get them to behave in a way that makes us more comfortable. A garden, on the other hand, is a relationship founded on trust and acceptance. It is a space where we offer our love, support, and wisdom, but we respect the other person's innate freedom to be who they are. It is understanding that every person has their own path, their own lessons to learn, and their own karma to unfold. We cannot walk their path for them. We can only tend to the garden of our relationship, making it a safe, nourishing place where they feel free to be themselves. This points to the essential difference between conditional attachment and true, unconditional love. Attachment, the force that builds the cage, says, "I need you to be a certain way to make me feel secure. I need your approval to feel good about myself. I need you to act in this manner, so my world feels stable and predictable." Attachment uses the other person as a means to an end, a tool to manage our own anxiety and fulfill our own needs. True love, the force that cultivates the garden, is an expression of what is called metta, or loving kindness. Its simple, powerful wish is, may you be happy, may you be free from suffering. This wish is not conditional. It does not say, may you be happy, as long as your happiness fits into my plans. It is a radical celebration of the other person's sovereignty. It means we can feel sad if a child moves far away, but we still support their journey because we want them to be happy. It means we can disagree with a friend's choice, but we still love them because we honor their right to make their own mistakes. A huge part of this practice is letting go of the need to be right. The ego loves nothing more than the feeling of victory in an argument. We will often sacrifice connection for correctness. We listen not to understand, but to find flaws in the other person's logic, to gather ammunition for our rebuttal. This turns conversation into combat. The practice of letting go is to enter a discussion with the primary goal of understanding, not winning. We can state our own truth clearly and kindly, and then we can listen to theirs with genuine openness. Can we hold space for two different realities to exist at once, without needing one to vanquish the other? This simple shift from "I need to win" to "I want to understand" can dissolve decades of conflict and create the possibility for genuine intimacy. This is the practice of deep listening. It is one of the greatest gifts we can offer another human being. It means putting aside our own internal chatter, our own agenda, our own desire to fix or advise, and simply offering our full, spacious presence. When we listen deeply, we are not just hearing words. We are hearing the emotions, the needs, and the unspoken pain behind the words. We are creating the safe space of the garden, where the other person feels seen, heard, and valued for who they are, not for who we want them to be. Ultimately, we must realize that this act of releasing others is also an act of releasing ourselves. The jailer is not free. He must spend all his time and energy watching the prisoner, worrying about their escape, and maintaining the walls of the prison. When we are constantly trying to manage other people's lives, our own mind is never at rest. We are caught in a cycle of worry, frustration, disappointment, and resentment. When we grant others the dignity of their own path, we give ourselves the gift of peace. We are freed from the impossible, exhausting job of being the general manager of the universe. We can finally put down that heavy burden and rest. This profound act of release, of granting freedom, must now be turned inward. For just as we build prisons for others, we build the most secure and unforgiving prison for the person we used to be. We hold our past selves captive, judging our past actions with the wisdom of the present. We replay our mistakes. We cling to our regrets. We refuse to grant parole to the person who, with the knowledge they had at the time, did the best they could. Our next essential step on this path of liberation is to learn to open that cell door, to look at our past self with compassion, and to finally let go. We have learned to cultivate a garden of love in our relationships, to release others from the cages of our expectations, and, in doing so, to free ourselves. This practice of letting go, of granting freedom, must now be turned towards the one person we hold most captive, the person we used to be. For if our relationships with others are prisons of expectation, our relationship with our own past is often a maximum security cell, a place of solitary confinement where we endlessly sentence ourselves for crimes long since committed. We carry our history like a weary traveler, carrying a heavy bag filled with rocks, each stone a regret, a resentment, a mistake, a hurt. We become so accustomed to the weight on our shoulders that we forget we have the power to simply put the bag down. Our next great act of liberation is to let go of the weight of yesterday. The first thing we must understand is that the past does not exist. This is not a metaphysical riddle. It is a simple, practical truth. The past has no reality outside of our own memory. Right here, in this present moment, it is a ghost, woven from the threads of thought and emotion. It has no power to influence the present unless we give it that power. We give it power every time we choose to dwell on it, to ruminate on it, to allow the stories of yesterday to dictate the feelings of today. The past is not haunting us. We are actively haunting ourselves with the past. There is a timeless Zen story that captures this truth with perfect elegance. Two monks, one senior and one junior, were on a long journey. Their path led them to a river that was swollen and muddy from recent rains. On the bank stood a beautiful young woman in fine clothes, hesitating to cross for fear of ruining her dress and being swept away by the strong current. Without a word, the senior monk walked up to her, hoisted her onto his back, and carried her across the turbulent water, setting her down gently on the other side. She thanked him, and he simply nodded and continued on his way. The junior monk followed, his face a mask of silent disapproval. For hours they walked on in silence, but the junior monk was seething. His mind was a storm of judgment. How could he do that, he thought. We are monks. We have taken strict vows not to touch a woman. It is a serious transgression. What a terrible example he has set. He replayed the scene over and over in his mind, his indignation growing with every step. Finally, unable to contain himself any longer, he burst out, "Brother, I cannot stay silent any longer. What you did back there was wrong. You broke our sacred vows by touching that woman." The senior monk stopped, turned to his agitated companion, and looked at him with a calm, compassionate gaze. "Brother," he said softly, "I left her back at the riverbank hours ago. Are you still carrying her?" This simple question is one of the most profound we can ever ask ourselves. We are all the junior monk. The woman at the river is different for each of us. For some, it is the job we were fired from 10 years ago. For others, it is a harsh criticism a parent made in our childhood. It is the business that failed, the relationship that ended badly, the foolish mistake we made that still makes us cringe with shame. The event itself is long gone. It exists only as a memory, a story, but we continue to carry it. We are no longer at the river, but in the landscape of our mind, the woman is still on our back. We allow the dead past to poison the living present. The mechanism that keeps us carrying these burdens is called rumination. It is crucial to distinguish rumination from healthy reflection. Reflection is the process of looking back at an event to learn from it. We analyze what happened, extract the lesson, integrate the wisdom, and move on. The emotional charge dissipates. Rumination is a toxic loop. It is replaying the event over and over, not to learn but to re-experience the pain. It is the endless cycle of what if only, and he shouldn't have. It is picking at a mental wound, refusing to let it heal. Each time we ruminate, we are re-injuring ourselves, keeping the emotional pain as fresh as the day it happened. To let go of the past, we must learn the art of forgiveness. For many, forgiveness seems like an impossible task. It can feel like we are condoning what happened or letting the other person off the hook. But this is a misunderstanding. The Buddha used a powerful metaphor. Holding on to anger and resentment is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. No matter how good your aim is, you are the one who is being burned. Right here, right now. Forgiveness is not a gift you give to the other person. It is a profound act of self-love, of self-liberation. It is the simple, wise decision to open your hand and drop the hot coal. It does not erase the past, but it frees the present from its fiery grip. You can do this without ever speaking to the other person. It is an internal release, a choice to no longer carry the poison of resentment in your own heart. This applies with equal, if not greater, force to forgiving ourselves. We are often our own harshest critics and most unforgiving judges. We hold the person we were 5, 10, or 20 years ago to the standard of the person we are today. We forget that the person who made that mistake did not have the wisdom, experience, or perspective that we now possess. They were doing the best they could with the understanding they had at the time. To forgive ourselves is to look back with compassion, to acknowledge our shared humanity and fallibility, and to release ourselves from the endless cycle of self-blame. It is to finally let the junior monk off our own back. This is all made possible by a deep appreciation of impermanence. Because life is a constant flow, the past is truly gone. It has dissolved. The person you were a moment ago is no more. Every breath is a new beginning. Every sunrise offers a clean slate. The past only has power over us if we chain ourselves to it with our attention. When we find our mind wandering back to the riverbank, we can gently acknowledge it. Ah, there is the memory of the woman. And then, with great kindness, we can bring our awareness back to the feeling of our feet on the path. Right here, right now, we can choose to leave her where she belongs, in the past. The mind, however, is a creature of habit. When it is not carrying the heavy bag of yesterday's regrets, it has another favorite pastime. It loves to race ahead into the misty, uncertain terrain of tomorrow. It abandons the solid ground of the present to live in a world of fantasy, a world of what if. It trades the weight of resentment for the equally heavy burden of anxiety. Having learned to put down the bag of rocks we drag behind us, we must now learn to stop chasing the phantom that dances before us. We must learn to let go of the mirage of tomorrow. We have learned to put down the heavy bag of the past, to release ourselves from the ghost town of memory and regret. But the mind, freed from the burden of what has been, has another favorite destination, an equally illusory realm where it loves to dwell. It leaps forward, out of the solid reality of the present moment, into the shimmering, uncertain mirage of tomorrow. When we are not being haunted by the ghosts of yesterday, we are often being tormented by the phantoms of the future. This anxious state of mind, this habit of suffering events that have not yet occurred, is the essence of worry. To complete our journey into the now, we must learn to let go of the mirage of the future. It is essential, at the outset, to distinguish between wise planning and corrosive worry. Planning is a necessary and skillful activity that takes place in the present moment. It is the act of looking at the map, assessing the terrain, and charting a prudent course. It is packing a raincoat because the forecast suggests a chance of showers. Worry, on the other hand, is the emotional and mental anguish we experience while being lost in imagined future catastrophes. It is sitting at home, staring at the map, and having a full-blown panic attack about a potential rockslide that may or may not happen. Planning is a calm, rational process that empowers us. Worry is a chaotic, irrational loop that paralyzes us and steals our peace. There is an old story of a farmer who was a master of worry. In the beautiful, hopeful days of early spring, as he planted his seeds in the dark, rich earth, he could not feel the joy of new beginnings. His mind was already in the heart of summer. He saw a merciless, brassy sun baking his fields, cracking the earth, withering his young crops. He suffered the agony of a drought on a cool, damp April morning. Then, summer arrived. The rains were timely, the sun was warm, and the crops grew tall and green. But the farmer could not enjoy the long, sweet days. His mind had already leaped ahead to autumn. He pictured a sudden, killing frost descending overnight, turning his vibrant green fields to a blackened mush. He felt the bitter chill of that frost on a warm July afternoon. Autumn came, and the harvest was more bountiful than he could have hoped. The air was crisp, the colors were a symphony of red and gold, but the farmer felt no gratitude. His mind was now lost in the depths of winter, imagining his family huddled together, shivering and hungry as a terrible blizzard raged outside. He felt the biting wind of that imaginary storm while standing in the gentle autumn sunshine. And so his life went. He lived his years in a state of perpetual, forward-looking fear, suffering a constant series of disasters that existed only in his mind. And in doing so, he completely missed the simple, tangible, and often beautiful reality of the life he was actually living. This farmer's mindset is not a rare affliction. It is the default setting for the human brain. Our minds are not designed for happiness. They were designed for survival. For our ancient ancestors living in a world of real physical threats, the brain that was constantly scanning the horizon for predators, the one that assumed the rustle in the grass was a lion and not the wind, was the brain that survived to pass on its genes. We have inherited this negativity bias. Our brain is like Velcro for potential threats and Teflon for positive experiences. In our modern world, where physical threats are far less frequent, this ancient survival mechanism doesn't just switch off. It finds new targets. It latches onto potential financial problems, social embarrassments, health concerns, and career setbacks. It creates an endless hum of low-grade anxiety, constantly asking, what if? What if? What if? To understand this is to depersonalize our worry. It is not a sign that you are broken or weak. It is simply your ancient brain doing its old job in a new context. The antidote to this future-oriented anxiety is not to think our way out of it. We cannot defeat anxious thoughts with more thoughts. That is like trying to flatten ripples in a pond with a stick. The only way out is to drop out of the realm of thought altogether and come back into the reality of the present moment. The gateway to the present is always through the body and the senses. When you notice your mind beginning to spiral into a what-if scenario, you can perform a simple, powerful act of rescue. Feel your feet flat on the floor. Feel the solid, reliable sensation of the ground beneath you. The ground is real. It is here, now. The future catastrophe is not. Wiggle your toes. The sensation is immediate and present. Another powerful anchor is sound. Pause your internal monologue and just listen. What can you hear right now? The hum of a computer, a distant siren, the sound of your own breathing. These sounds are happening in this moment. They are real. The future you are worrying about is a fantasy. And, as always, there is the breath. The breath is our most faithful and reliable anchor to the now. You cannot take a breath in the past. You cannot take a breath in the future. Each breath can only be experienced in this present moment. When your mind is racing ahead, gently bring your attention to the simple, physical sensation of the air entering your nostrils, filling your lungs, and then leaving your body. With each breath, you are bringing your awareness back home, out of the phantom world of tomorrow, and into the living reality of today. Ultimately, the deepest practice for releasing the future is to embrace uncertainty. The fundamental reason we worry is that the future is, by its very nature, unknowable, and we find this terrifying. The ego wants certainty. It wants guarantees. It wants to control life itself, to ensure its own safety and comfort. But life cannot be controlled. To demand certainty from an uncertain universe is the very definition of a futile struggle. Peace is found not in achieving certainty, but in becoming comfortable with uncertainty. It is a radical act of trust. It is not a blind trust that everything will work out exactly as we want, but a deeper trust in our own capacity to meet whatever comes. It is the confidence that just as we are able to meet this present moment with all its sensations and feelings, we will also be able to meet the next moment and the one after that. This is not weakness or resignation. It is a profound and unshakable strength, a quiet confidence that does not depend on external conditions. A great deal of our frantic planning and our anxious worrying about the future is driven by a single, powerful engine: the belief that security can be found through accumulation. We think that if we can just acquire enough money, enough property, enough status, or enough achievements, we can build a fortress strong enough to protect us from the winds of uncertainty. We spend our present moments, our precious, unrepeatable life energy, in the service of building this fortress to protect us in a future that may never come. This endless and unsatisfying pursuit of more is one of the greatest sources of both our present dissatisfaction and our future anxiety. To find true peace, we must therefore turn our attention to this deep-seated belief and learn to dismantle it. We must learn to let go of the illusion that security lies in having more, and instead discover the profound richness that can only be found in what is truly enough. We have learned to release our minds from the phantom world of the future, to stop suffering from catastrophes that exist only in our imagination. Yet, as we return to the present moment, we often find that it, too, is a source of disquiet. A significant portion of our anxiety about the future and our dissatisfaction with the present is fueled by a single, powerful, and deeply ingrained cultural narrative: the gospel of materialism. We are taught from our first breath that happiness is something that can be acquired, that peace can be purchased, and that security can be built from an accumulation of things. This relentless pursuit of more is the engine of our modern economy, but it is also the source of a profound and pervasive inner poverty. To find true peace, we must therefore investigate our relationship with the material world and learn the liberating art of finding richness in what is truly enough. Consumer culture is the air we breathe. It whispers to us from every screen, every billboard, every magazine. It tells us that who we are is defined by what we own. The car we drive, the brand of clothes we wear, the size of our house, the technology we carry, these are not just objects, we are told. They are markers of our success, our taste, our very identity. This system is masterfully designed to create a permanent state of dissatisfaction. The moment you acquire the latest phone, a newer, better model is already being advertised. The moment you feel a flicker of pride in your new car, you see a more luxurious one drive by. This endless cycle of desire, acquisition, and fleeting satisfaction is what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill. We run and run, putting in immense effort to acquire the next thing, only to find that our baseline level of happiness remains stubbornly unchanged. We get a brief thrill from the novelty, but it quickly fades, and we are left once again with that familiar, hollow feeling of not quite enough, needing an even bigger thrill next time. We are like the hungry ghost, endlessly consuming yet never, ever full. There is a timeless story that cuts through this illusion with beautiful simplicity. A highly successful and stressed-out businessman from a wealthy country went on vacation to a small coastal village. One morning, he saw a local fisherman relaxing beside his small boat, playing with his children, his day's modest catch already accounted for. The businessman, a man accustomed to maximizing potential, was disturbed by this display of contentment. He approached the fisherman. "Why aren't you out there fishing longer?" he asked. "You could easily catch more fish." The fisherman smiled and replied, "I have caught enough to feed my family for today." The businessman scoffed. "But imagine if you worked harder. You could catch more fish, sell the surplus, and buy a bigger boat. Then you could hire a crew, catch even more fish, and buy a whole fleet of boats. You could open your own cannery, control the distribution, and vertically integrate your business. In 15 to 20 years, after a successful IPO, you would be a multi-millionaire." The fisherman listened patiently to this grand, complicated plan. When the businessman was finished, the fisherman asked a simple question: "And what would I do then?" The businessman's face lit up. Then you would have finally made it. You could retire. You could move to a small coastal village, sleep late, play with your children, enjoy a long siesta in the afternoon, and spend your evenings drinking wine and playing music with your friends. The fisherman smiled his gentle smile, gestured to his children playing at his feet, and the small guitar leaning against his boat, and said, "But, my friend, that is what I am doing right now." This parable is a profound meditation on the nature of true wealth. The businessman had spent his entire life on a frantic, complex, and stressful detour, only to arrive at a destination of simple contentment that the fisherman had never left. The story challenges the very foundation of our materialistic pursuits, forcing us to ask, what is it that we are truly working for? Is it possible that the peace and freedom we are chasing in the future are already available to us in a simpler present? The path to discovering this is not to advocate for a life of forced poverty or destitution. Buddhist wisdom makes a clear and practical distinction between our genuine needs and our manufactured wants. We all have basic needs for healthy food, adequate shelter, appropriate clothing, and a safe environment. To meet these needs is a wholesome and necessary part of life. The problem arises not from our needs, but from the endless, neurotic proliferation of our wants. A want is a desire that has been created by advertising, by social comparison, by our own insecurity. A want is the hungry ghost whispering that we are incomplete and that this next purchase will be the thing that finally makes us whole. The practice of mindfulness here is to become a curious investigator of our own desires. Before making a purchase, before striving for the next acquisition, we can pause and ask ourselves with gentle honesty, is this coming from a place of genuine need, or is this a want trying to fill an inner emptiness? This inward-looking question naturally leads to an outward simplification. Many of us find that our physical environment is a direct reflection of our mental state. A cluttered house, a garage full of forgotten objects, a closet overflowing with clothes. We never wear this external clutter, creates a subtle but constant internal static. The act of simplifying our surroundings can be a profound spiritual practice. Letting go of possessions we no longer need or love is an exercise in non-attachment. It is a declaration that our identity is not tied to our things. As we create more physical space in our homes, we often find a corresponding sense of space and clarity opening up in our minds. We free up our time from managing and maintaining so much stuff. We free up our financial resources. And most importantly, we free up our precious mental energy from the low-grade hum of consumer desire. This leads to the ultimate redefinition of wealth. Our culture teaches us that wealth is measured by the size of our assets. The wisdom of the ages teaches us that true wealth is measured by the shortness of our list of wants. A person who lives a simple life and needs very little to be happy is infinitely richer and freer than a billionaire who is consumed by the anxiety of managing his fortune and the desire to acquire even more. Freedom is not about finally getting everything you want. It is about realizing you already have everything you need. It is about wanting what you have, not having what you want. This practice of letting go of our attachment to the material world is a powerful step toward inner peace. But to truly release our grip on the solid things of the world, it is helpful to inquire more deeply into their fundamental nature. We cling to possessions because we believe they are solid, real, and capable of providing us with lasting security. We believe they have an independent existence. Buddhist wisdom, however, invites us to look closer, to use the light of our awareness, to see if these objects are as solid and separate as they appear. This investigation leads us to one of the most subtle, challenging, and ultimately liberating concepts on the path: the understanding that all phenomena are empty of a fixed, independent self. Our next step is to explore the profound wisdom of emptiness, or sunyata. We have walked the path of letting go, releasing our grip on the past, the future, and even the material possessions we once believed could bring us security. We have learned to find peace in simplicity and contentment in what we already have. But to truly liberate ourselves from the deep habit of clinging, we must go one level deeper. We must investigate the very nature of the things we are trying to possess and the self that is doing the possessing. This inquiry leads us to what is arguably the most profound, subtle, and radically freeing teaching in all of Buddhist thought: the wisdom of sunyata, or emptiness. This word can sound frightening, suggesting a cold, nihilistic void. But its true meaning is the very opposite. It is not a void to be feared, but a spaciousness to be celebrated. For in it lies the secret of all creation and the key to our ultimate freedom. There is a celebrated Zen story that serves as the perfect gateway to this understanding. A highly educated university professor, a man whose mind was filled with facts, theories, and complex ideas, traveled to visit a reclusive Zen master to learn about the nature of Zen. The master welcomed him and invited him for tea. As the professor began to expound on his own deep knowledge of philosophy and religion, the master calmly began to pour tea into his guest's cup. He filled the cup to the brim, but then, without changing his expression, he continued to pour. Hot tea spilled over the rim, cascading onto the saucer and then onto the table. The professor, shocked, finally cried out, "Stop! The cup is already full. No more will go in." The Zen master paused, looked at the professor, and said softly, "Like this cup, you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" On one level, this story is a lesson about intellectual humility, about the need to approach new wisdom with a beginner's mind, free from the clutter of preconceived notions. But on a deeper level, it is a direct pointer to the nature of emptiness. The empty cup is not useless. It is the state of pure potential. A cup that is already full cannot fulfill its function, which is to receive. Emptiness, in this sense, is not nothingness. It is a state of radical receptivity and infinite possibility. But the wisdom of Sunyata goes even further. It invites us to look not just at the space within the cup, but at the cup itself. Let us take an ordinary object, like a simple sheet of paper. What is it? We can say it is paper. But what is paper made of? It is made from a tree. So, already, we see the tree is inside the paper. But what did the tree need to exist? It needed sunlight, so the sun is in the paper. It needed rain, which comes from the clouds, so the clouds are in the paper. It needed the earth to grow, so the earth is in the paper. It needed a logger to cut it down and a truck to transport it. It needed a factory with electricity and workers to process it into pulp. The logger and the factory workers needed food to eat, which was grown by farmers who also depended on the sun, the rain, and the earth. If we look deeply enough at this simple sheet of paper, we see that it contains the entire cosmos. It is made of a vast, interconnected web of non-paper elements. If you were to remove the sun, or the clouds, or the earth, or the logger from the equation, this sheet of paper could not exist. This is the essence of Sunyata. When we say the paper is empty, we do not mean it is not here. We mean it is empty of a separate, independent, isolated self. Its existence is entirely dependent on the existence of everything else. The Zen master, Thich Nhat Hanh, coined the beautiful term interbeing to describe this reality. The paper interis with the sun, the cloud, and the forest. One cannot be without the others. Now, we must turn this powerful lens upon ourselves. We feel like a solid, separate me. But are we? We are made of the food we have eaten, the water we have drunk, the air we are breathing at this very moment. Our body is a temporary vessel for the elements of the earth. Our thoughts and ideas are not truly ours. We have inherited them from our parents, our teachers, our culture, and the books we have read. Our consciousness itself depends on the objects it perceives. We, too, are empty of a separate self. We interbe with the entire universe. The farmer who grew our food is in us. The ancestors whose DNA we carry are in us. The star that forged the iron in our blood is in us. The illusion of a small, separate, isolated self dissolves when we look with the eyes of wisdom. This realization is the ultimate antidote to clinging. How can we be so attached to a material possession when we see that it is not a solid thing at all, but merely a temporary gathering of universal conditions? It is like trying to own a wave on the ocean. The wave has a form, but it has no separate existence from the ocean itself. How can we be so consumed by our ego, our reputation, our small story of me, when we see that our very being is woven from the fabric of the entire cosmos? Seeing emptiness loosens the grip of desire. The need to acquire and possess things that have no independent reality begins to seem like a strange and futile game. Furthermore, this understanding of emptiness is the very foundation of hope and transformation. If things were not empty, if they had a fixed, solid, unchanging essence, then no change would ever be possible. A seed could never become a tree because it would be permanently and essentially a seed. A person who made a mistake could never become a wiser person because they would be fixed in their mistakeness. It is precisely because all things are empty of a permanent self that they are fluid, dynamic, and capable of change. Emptiness is not a dead end. It is the womb of all possibility. It is the reason that a hard heart can soften, a wounded mind can heal, and a new beginning is possible in every single moment. Emptiness is the ultimate explanation for impermanence. Things change because they are not fixed. So, we can see that sunyata is not a cold, abstract philosophy. It is a description of the world as it truly is, a shimmering, interconnected, and miraculous dance of interdependence. Nothing is separate. Everything is touching everything else. The line we draw between ourself and the world is just a line drawn in our own mind. When we begin to see the world and ourselves through this lens of emptiness and interbeing, a profound and natural shift occurs in our heart. The illusion of separation is the root of fear, greed, and conflict. When we feel separate, we feel we must protect ourselves, we must compete, we must accumulate. But when we experience the reality of our interconnectedness, the wall between self and other becomes thin and transparent. We see that the suffering of another being is not entirely separate from our own suffering. We see that the joy of another is not entirely separate from our own joy. We understand that to harm another is to harm ourselves. This deep, non-sentimental, and intelligent realization of our shared existence gives rise to a powerful and spontaneous warmth, a feeling of kinship with all of life. This feeling is not an emotional reaction. It is a wise response to the true nature of reality. It has a name. It is called karuna, or compassion. Our next step is to explore how this profound wisdom of emptiness naturally blossoms into a compassionate heart. When the mind truly begins to absorb the lesson of emptiness, the lesson that nothing exists independently, that the self is a confluence, and the flower is a meeting of sun and soil, a profound and unexpected warmth begins to bloom in the heart. This is not an intellectual exercise. It is a felt reality. The hard lines we draw between me and you, us and them, begin to soften, and in their place, a new kind of connection emerges. This connection is called karuna, or compassion. It is the natural response of a heart that understands its kinship with all that lives. We move now from the clarifying wisdom of the mind to the liberating power of the gentle heart, for they are not separate, but two wings of the same bird, lifting us out of our suffering. Compassion, in this tradition, is not what we often think it is. It is not pity. Pity stands on high ground, looking down at another's misfortune, feeling a sense of relief that it is not our own. Pity reinforces the very separation that causes us pain. It says, "You, over there, are suffering." Compassion, however, steps off the high ground and sits beside the one who suffers. It recognizes the shared nature of the human condition. It says, "I see your pain, and I recognize it as a reflection of the pain that is part of our shared existence." It is empathy in action. It is the trembling of the heart in the face of suffering, coupled with the sincere wish for that suffering to cease. It does not create distance. It closes it. It is the ultimate recognition that your struggle is, in some fundamental way, my own. The journey into this vast, open-hearted state must begin in the one place we so often neglect, within ourselves. For most of us, especially in a world that demands perfection, the inner landscape is a battlefield. The voice of the inner critic is relentless, cataloging our failures, highlighting our flaws, constantly reminding us of where we fall short. We treat ourselves with a harshness we would never dream of inflicting upon a friend. This internal violence is the very source of the second arrow. The first arrow of a mistake or a failure is painful enough, but we then proceed to shoot ourselves with a volley of secondary arrows, the arrows of self-recrimination, shame, and judgment. Cultivating compassion for others while maintaining a state of war with yourself is impossible. It is like trying to pour water from an empty cup. Therefore, the most radical and essential first step in cultivating karuna is to turn that gentle acceptance inward. This is self-compassion. It is not self-indulgence or self-pity. It is simply applying the same kindness and understanding to your own struggles that you would offer to someone you deeply care for. It is the practice of meeting your own imperfections, your own sadness, your own anger, not with another layer of judgment, but with a gentle acknowledgement. It is whispering to yourself, yes, this is difficult right now. It is okay to feel this way. It is placing a hand over your own heart and allowing yourself to be just as you are, a flawed, beautiful, struggling human being. When you learn to forgive yourself for not being perfect, you create the space to forgive others for the same. When you can acknowledge your own suffering with tenderness, you unlock the capacity to meet the suffering of others with that same tenderness. You must first allow your own well to be filled with the waters of kindness before you can offer a drink to a thirsty world. Once that foundation of self-compassion is laid, our perception of others begins to transform. We begin to understand a profound truth. Those who cause the most harm are often those who are in the most pain. Hurt people. An act of anger, of cruelty, of manipulation does not arise from a place of peace and contentment. It arises from a deep well of fear, of insecurity, of delusion, of that person's own unacknowledged dukkha. Seeing this does not mean we condone harmful actions. It does not mean we become passive doormats. It means we stop taking it so personally. We shift our understanding from, this person is attacking me, to, this person's suffering is spilling over and touching me. This shift is incredibly liberating. It frees us from the prison of resentment. It allows us to protect ourselves, to set firm boundaries, not from a place of reactive anger, but from a place of wise, compassionate clarity. We stop seeing a monster and instead see a deeply wounded human being acting out their pain. In doing so, we refuse to let their suffering become our own. We refuse to shoot the second arrow. There is no story that illustrates this transformative power more profoundly than that of Angulimala. In the time of the Buddha, a terrifying serial killer roamed the countryside. His name was Angulimala, which means garland of fingers, for he wore a gruesome necklace made from the fingers of his 99 victims. Fear paralyzed entire villages. Travelers would take long detours to avoid his path. One day, despite the warnings of the villagers, the Buddha began to walk calmly down the very road that Angulimala haunted. Angulimala saw him from a distance, a lone, serene figure in a saffron robe. He was astonished and delighted. Finally, he thought, I will get my 100th finger and complete my garland. He grabbed his sword and began to run after the Buddha. But a strange thing happened. Though the Buddha was only walking at a normal pace, Angulimala, running with all his might, could not catch up. Exhausted and enraged, he screamed, "Stop! Monk, stop!" The Buddha, without breaking his stride, turned his head slightly and replied in a calm, clear voice, "I have stopped, Angulimala. It is you who have not stopped." Angulimala was stunned into silence. How could this monk say he had stopped when he was still walking? "What do you mean, monk?" he demanded. The Buddha turned to face him fully, his eyes filled not with fear or judgment, but with an immense, unwavering compassion. "I have stopped," he said. "I have stopped killing. I have stopped causing harm. I have laid down the sword of anger and hatred. You are the one who is still running, still killing, still caught in the endless cycle of violence and suffering. It is you who must stop." In that moment, faced with a compassion so vast and fearless that it did not even recognize him as a monster, Angulimala's rage collapsed. He saw the truth of the Buddha's words. He saw the mountain of suffering he had created for others and for himself. He threw down his sword, fell to his knees, and wept. The Buddha did not see a murderer. He saw a being trapped in profound delusion and pain. And it was this compassionate insight that broke the spell. Angulimala went on to become a monk and, through great effort, eventually became an enlightened being himself. This story reveals that compassion is not a passive sentiment. It is the most powerful force for transformation in the universe. To actively cultivate this force within our own hearts, we can turn to the formal practice of metta, or loving kindness meditation. It is a systematic training of the heart. You begin by sitting quietly and offering phrases of kindness to yourself. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be safe. May I live with ease. You repeat these phrases, allowing the feeling to sink in. At first, it may feel mechanical, but you persist. Then, you bring to mind a dear friend or loved one, someone for whom it is easy to feel affection, and you extend the same wishes to them. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe. May you live with ease. Next, you extend the wishes to a neutral person, someone you see but have no strong feelings about, like a cashier at a store. After that comes the most challenging part. You bring to mind a difficult person, someone who has hurt you or caused you irritation, and you try, as best you can, to offer them the same wishes. You are not condoning their behavior. You are simply recognizing their humanity and wishing for them to be free from the suffering that causes them to act as they do. Finally, you expand your awareness outward, extending these wishes of loving kindness to all beings everywhere, without exception. This practice is like a gentle rain on the hard, dry ground of the heart. With patience and repetition, it softens the soil, allowing the seeds of karuna to sprout. It untangles the knots of judgment and resentment, replacing them with a gentle, open-hearted presence. This profound shift from a mind of cold judgment to a heart of warm compassion is not just a pleasant feeling. It is a fundamental change in our mode of existence. It is the necessary preparation for letting go of our obsession with frantic, anxious effort. When the heart is no longer at war with itself or the world, the frantic need to constantly do things, to prove our worth, or to control our environment begins to subside. We find that we can simply exist, that we can simply be. And in that state of being, a new kind of peace, one we could never achieve through control, finally has the space to arise. The heart that has been softened by compassion, that has begun to see the world through the lens of shared suffering and shared humanity, becomes less needy. It no longer desperately seeks validation from the outside world, because it is discovering a source of unconditional warmth within. This inner softening prepares us for one of the most radical and liberating shifts invited by this path, the journey from a life defined by frantic doing to a life grounded in profound being. If you live in the modern world, you have participated in a ritual that is so common, we barely notice its significance. When you meet someone new, after the initial greetings, one question almost inevitably arises: so, what do you do? We ask this question, and we answer it, without realizing we are speaking the language of a profound illusion, the illusion that our worth is synonymous with our function. We have been taught to believe that our value is conditional. It is tied to our job title, our productivity, our achievements, our usefulness to the economic machine. We are not human beings, so much as human doers. This relentless focus on doing creates a state of perpetual, low-grade anxiety. We are always on, always striving, always chasing the next goal, the next promotion, the next item on the to-do list. We feel a pressure to optimize every moment, to turn hobbies into side hustles, to monetize our passions. Stillness feels like a threat. A quiet moment is not an opportunity for peace, but an invitation for guilt to creep in, whispering that we should be doing something more productive. This way of life is the primary cause of the exhaustion that so many of us feel, a soul-deep weariness that no amount of sleep can cure. It is because we have tied our very identity, our sense of self, to the churning engine of our actions. The ego loves this arrangement. The ego is the story we tell ourselves about who we are, and it builds its fortress brick by brick with the accomplishments, titles, and roles we accumulate. I am a doctor. I am a successful entrepreneur. I am a good parent. These are the labels the ego clings to for its very survival. When the doing stops, the ego panics. If I am not doing, then who am I? This question reveals a terrifying void at the center of a life built on action, and it is this void we are constantly running from. Our ceaseless activity is a flight from the quiet, spacious, and ultimately liberating truth of our own being. The antidote to this frantic existence is a radical embrace of what our society deems useless. The Zen tradition, in particular, celebrates activities that have no goal other than the activity itself. It is the practice of purposeless walking, not to get to a destination, but simply to feel the soles of the feet connecting with the earth, step after step. It is the art of cloud gazing, not to forecast the weather, but to witness the silent, effortless drift of form across the vast, empty canvas of the sky. It is the simple act of sitting with a cup of tea, not while scrolling through emails or planning the day, but just to feel the warmth of the ceramic in your hands, to notice the steam rising, to taste the subtle flavors on your tongue. These are not acts of laziness. They are potent acts of rebellion against the tyranny of productivity. They are moments of pure being. In these moments, we are not trying to achieve anything, improve anything, or become anything. We are simply present with what is. We are reconnecting with the fundamental reality of our own existence, a reality that is always here, just beneath the noisy surface of our doing. This is not a selfish indulgence. It is a necessary form of nourishment. It is in these moments of useless being that we replenish the wellspring of our inner resources, the very resources we deplete in our life of constant striving. There is a story of a master artisan, a woodcarver renowned throughout the land for his impossibly beautiful and lifelike creations. A wealthy patron, who had commissioned a magnificent sculpture, came to watch the master at work. He expected to see a flurry of intense, effortful activity. Instead, he saw a man in a state of deep, calm absorption. The chisel moved like water. The wood seemed to fall away effortlessly. There was no struggle, no sign of strain. When the day was over, the patron asked the master, "What is your secret? What technique do you use to achieve such perfection with so little effort?" The master put down his tools and smiled. "There is no secret," he said. "When I pick up my chisel, I first quiet my mind. I let go of all thought of the patron, of the payment, of praise or criticism. I even let go of the idea of the sculpture I am supposed to create. My mind becomes still, and then, when my hand moves, there is no longer an I who is carving. There is only the carving happening. The wood and I are one. The chisel is simply guiding a form that was already there. The I who tries to do the carving only gets in the way. The secret is to disappear, This is the essence of action that arises from being. It is what athletes call the zone, a state of flow where the ego dissolves and the action becomes effortless, intuitive, and perfect. This reveals a profound paradox. Action that arises from a state of anxious doing is driven by fear, by the need to prove oneself. It is often hurried, scattered, and inefficient. It drains our energy because it is constantly battling reality, trying to force a desired outcome. But action that arises from a state of deep being is calm, centered, and fully present. It does not fight with the moment. It harmonizes with it. Because it is not attached to the future result, it can give its full attention to the present process. And paradoxically, this is the state from which our most effective, creative, and brilliant work emerges. It does not deplete our energy. It can even feel restorative, because it connects us to a source of intelligence deeper than the chattering ego. The ultimate message of this shift from doing to being is perhaps the most healing message one can receive. You do not have to earn your right to exist. Your value as a human being is not measured by your output, your income, or the length of your resume. Your worth is inherent and unconditional. The universe does not ask a star to justify its shining. A tree is not required to meet a quota of leaves. Their being is their value. Your being is your value. To simply be here, to breathe, to feel, to be aware is enough. In a society that is constantly telling you that you are not enough, that you need to do more, be more, and have more, the choice to simply be is the ultimate act of self-love and spiritual freedom. This is not a call to abandon all responsibility and live a life of inertia. The world needs your gifts, your work, your unique contribution, but it is an invitation to change the inner source from which that contribution flows. To act not from a place of anxious deficiency, but from a place of centered fullness. To move through your life not like a frantic ghost, but like a grounded mountain. But how does one practice this? In a world that screams at us to do more, how do we cultivate the stillness of being? For this, we need a laboratory. We need a dedicated time and space to train the mind, to sit down and face the relentless momentum of our own thoughts. We need a silent gymnasium where we can practice, again and again, the simple but profound art of letting go of the doer and resting in pure awareness. This laboratory, this sanctuary of stillness, is the practice of formal meditation. We have journeyed through the landscape of the mind, understanding the nature of our restlessness and the wisdom of letting go. We have softened the heart with compassion and glimpsed the freedom that comes from shifting our focus from frantic doing to quiet being. Now, we arrive at the heart of the practice, the laboratory where all these concepts are put to the test and transformed from philosophy into a lived, felt reality. This laboratory is the soul of simplicity. It requires no special equipment, no expensive gear, no distant pilgrimage. It requires only you, a quiet space, and the courage to sit down and be still. We speak now of the practice of meditation. It is perhaps the most misunderstood and mythologized of all these tools. We imagine robed masters on mountaintops, their minds perfectly silent and empty. We assume it is an esoteric practice for the spiritually gifted. But this is not the truth. Meditation, at its core, is the simple and profound act of getting to know your own mind. And the most important thing to understand before you even begin is this. The goal of meditation is not to stop thinking. To believe that you must stop your thoughts is the surest path to frustration. The mind is a thought-producing organ. That is its nature, just as it is the nature of the heart to beat and the lungs to breathe. To try and force the mind to be silent is like trying to flatten the waves of the ocean with an iron. It is a violent, futile struggle. The goal is not to stop the thoughts, but to change your relationship to them. Imagine you are standing in the middle of a rushing river, the water of your thoughts swirling around you, pulling you downstream, knocking you off your feet. This is our normal state of being, completely identified with and carried away by the relentless current of our inner chatter. The practice of meditation is learning how to walk out of the river, find a comfortable spot on the bank, and simply watch the water flow by. The river does not stop, the thoughts do not cease, but you are no longer at their mercy. You are cultivating the role of the calm, impartial observer. You are learning to witness your own mind without being swept away by it. This is where true freedom lies. The instructions for this practice are breathtakingly simple. First, find a posture. This does not have to be the full lotus position you see in statues. You can sit in a chair, with your feet flat on the floor and your back straight. You can sit on a cushion on the floor, with your legs crossed comfortably. The key is to find a position that is both stable and alert. Your spine should be upright, like a noble tree, not rigid or tense, but embodying a sense of dignity. Your hands can rest gently in your lap. Your eyes can be softly closed, or you can leave them half open, with a soft, unfocused gaze resting on the floor a few feet in front of you. Now, you need an anchor to hold your attention in the present moment, a place to return to when the winds of thought blow you off course. The most reliable anchor is the breath. It is always with you, and it is always happening right now. You do not need to control it, deepen it, or change it in any way. Simply bring your awareness to the physical sensations of breathing. You might feel the cool air entering your nostrils. You might notice the gentle rise and fall of your chest, or the expansion and contraction of your abdomen. Choose one spot and rest your attention there. And now, the practice itself. You sit and you pay attention to the breath. Inevitably, in a few seconds or perhaps a minute, you will notice that your mind has wandered away. You are no longer with the breath. You are planning your dinner, replaying a conversation, worrying about the future. The moment you realize this has happened is a moment of pure gold. That is the moment of mindfulness. In that moment, without any anger or judgment at yourself for having wandered, you gently acknowledge the thought, perhaps labeling it softly in your mind as thinking or wandering. And then, you kindly, gently, guide your attention back to the anchor of the breath. That is all. You will do this over and over again. You will attend to the breath. You will wander. You will notice. And you will return. This act of returning, gently and without judgment, is the essential repetition of the practice. Every time you guide your attention back, you are strengthening the muscle of mindfulness. Each return is a victory. There is a classic Zen story that perfectly illustrates this process. Imagine your mind is a large, sealed glass jar filled with water and a great deal of mud. Someone has just shaken this jar violently. The water is completely opaque, a murky, chaotic brown. You cannot see through it at all. This is our mind in its usual, agitated state. Our instinctive reaction, when faced with this inner turmoil, is to try and fix it. We get angry at the mud, which is like judging ourselves for our messy thoughts and emotions. We try to shake the jar even more, hoping to force the mud to integrate, which is like wrestling with our thoughts and trying to make them go away. We might even try to open the jar and scoop the mud out, which is like getting lost in analyzing and trying to figure out every single thought. All of these actions only stir up the mud further, making the water even cloudier. The wisdom of meditation offers a different approach. What if you were to simply place the jar on a stable surface and let it be? What if you did nothing at all, but simply sat and watched it? Slowly, imperceptibly, At first, something magical would happen. Gravity, the natural law of stillness, would begin its work. The heaviest particles of mud would begin to drift downwards. The water at the top would slowly begin to clear. If you were to sit with it long enough, without any interference, eventually all the mud would settle into a neat layer at the bottom, and the water above would become perfectly transparent. The practice of meditation is the act of setting down the jar of your mind and allowing the mud of your thoughts, emotions, and memories to settle all on their own. We do not fight the mud. We simply create the conditions for clarity to emerge naturally. As you practice, you will face challenges. The mind will not give up its dominance easily. You will feel restless. The body will ache. An intense boredom may arise, and the mind will scream for any form of distraction. Your job is to treat these feelings just like any other thought. Acknowledge them. Here is restlessness. Here is boredom. And then return to the breath. You may feel drowsy or sleepy. This is also normal, especially if you are tired. It can also be a subtle form of resistance. Do your best to maintain an alert posture. If you do fall asleep, that is okay. The moment you wake up, simply begin again. At times, the stream of thoughts will feel like a torrential waterfall. Do not try to build a dam. Let it flow. Your task is not to stop the waterfall, but to remember your post on the bank and to keep returning to the simple, physical sensation of your own breathing. The profound effects of this practice are not confined to the 20 or 30 minutes you spend on the cushion. The stillness you cultivate begins to seep into the fabric of your daily life. The space you create between yourself and your thoughts in meditation becomes a space you can access in a stressful meeting or when you are stuck in traffic. That gap, that sacred pause between a triggering event and your habitual reaction, is where your freedom is born. You become less reactive, less impulsive. You begin to see your own patterns of anger and anxiety as they arise. And because you see them, they have less power over you. As you continue to sit in this silent sanctuary, day after day, you are doing more than just finding moments of peace. You are fundamentally rewiring your nervous system. You are cultivating a new quality of mind, a deep and stable equilibrium that can withstand the inevitable winds of praise and blame, gain and loss, joy and sorrow. This profound balance, this unshakable calm, born from the practice of stillness, is a quality known as equanimity, the mind that cannot be moved. As we continue the silent, patient work of sitting in meditation, allowing the muddy waters of the mind to settle, something remarkable begins to happen. The clarity that emerges is not just a fleeting state. The peace is not merely a temporary absence of noise. We are not just clearing the water, we are fundamentally changing its nature. Through consistent practice, a new quality of mind is born, a quality of profound stability and spaciousness. This quality is known in the Buddhist tradition as upekkha, or equanimity. It is one of the 4 sublime states of heart, alongside loving kindness, compassion, and sympathetic joy. And it is, perhaps, the crown jewel of the meditative path, the sign of a truly liberated mind. But we must be very careful here, because the word equanimity is easily misunderstood. To a mind conditioned by constant craving and aversion, a state of balance can sound like indifference. It can sound cold, distant, and uncaring. This is the absolute opposite of the truth. Equanimity is not indifference, just as the vast, deep ocean is not indifferent to the waves on its surface. It is a state of heart so expansive, so stable and all-encompassing, that it can hold the entirety of life's experiences without being thrown off balance. It is not a lack of feeling, but the capacity to feel everything without being a slave to anything. To understand equanimity, it helps to understand what it overcomes. Buddhist teachings speak of the 8 worldly winds, the forces that constantly blow our minds around, keeping us in a state of instability and anxiety. They come in 4 pairs of opposites. The first pair is praise and blame. Notice how a word of praise can lift you up into the clouds, filling you with pride and pleasure, and how a word of blame or criticism can send you crashing down into despair and self-doubt. The second pair is gain and loss. We are elated when we acquire something we want: money, a relationship, a possession, and we are devastated when we lose it. The third pair is pleasure and pain. We spend our lives chasing pleasant sensations and running from unpleasant ones, a constant, exhausting pursuit. The final pair is fame and disrepute. We crave recognition and a good reputation, and we live in fear of being shamed or forgotten. For the untrained mind, life is a small boat tossed mercilessly on the ocean of these 8 winds. Our inner peace is entirely dependent on external conditions we cannot control. We are happy only when the wind of praise is at our back, and miserable when the wind of blame is in our face. This is not freedom, this is bondage. Equanimity is the cultivation of a deep, heavy keel for the boat of the mind. The winds still blow. They are an inescapable part of the human experience. Praise will come, and so will blame. You will gain things, and you will lose them. But with equanimity, the boat remains stable. You can feel the warmth of praise without it inflating your ego. You can feel the sting of blame without it crushing your spirit. You can experience the sweetness of pleasure without desperately clinging to it. And you can endure the harshness of pain without adding the second arrow of resistance. You are no longer tossed about. You are steady. You are free. This steadiness is not cold. Apathy is a state of deficiency, a shutting down of the heart in fear. Equanimity is a state of immense strength and fullness. It is the warmth of a wise and boundless love. Imagine a wise grandmother watching her many grandchildren play. She loves them all deeply. She delights in their laughter and feels their sorrow when they fall. But her love is so vast and so stable that her own well-being is not dependent on their every move. She does not fly into a personal panic with every scraped knee or childish argument. Her presence is a source of calm and safety for them precisely because she is so unshakable. Her heart is big enough to hold all of their joys and sorrows without collapsing. This is equanimity. It is a love that has matured beyond anxious attachment. It is a caring that is so profound it does not need to grasp or control. It simply holds all of life's experiences in a spacious, non-judgmental embrace. This powerful state of mind does not arise from sheer willpower, from gritting your teeth and forcing yourself to be calm. It arises naturally from the soil of wisdom, specifically the deep, experiential understanding of 2 fundamental laws: impermanence and karma. We have spoken of impermanence, anicca, before. In meditation, we move from an intellectual idea of impermanence to a felt reality. We watch, breath by breath, as sensations, sounds, and thoughts arise and pass away. We see for ourselves that there is nothing solid to hold on to. When you know, deep in your bones, that all things are in flux, your grip naturally loosens. Why be inflated by praise? It is just a fleeting sound, a pleasant ripple that is already disappearing. Why be crushed by blame? It too is just a passing cloud in the vast sky of awareness. When you truly see that pleasure and pain are temporary, changing energies, You stop building your life around chasing one and fleeing the other. You learn to let them come and go, like weather passing through. The wisdom of impermanence is the great relaxer of the grasping mind. The second root of equanimity is a wise understanding of karma, the law of cause and effect. This is not a system of cosmic reward and punishment. It is a simple recognition of what we can and cannot control. We can control our intentions. We can control our actions of body, speech, and mind. These are the seeds we plant in the world. We cannot, however, control the results. We cannot control how others react, what the world gives back, or when the fruits of our actions will ripen. The mind without equanimity is constantly tormented by trying to control the results. The mind with equanimity shifts its focus entirely. It dedicates its energy to planting good seedstow, acting with kindness, integrity, and wisdom, and then it lets go of the outcome, accepting what comes with a peaceful heart, knowing that it, too, is a conditioned result that will surely change. This is the essence of working with grace and without anxiety. The most powerful image for the mind of equanimity is that of a great, ancient mountain. Picture it standing majestic and silent. The gentle breezes of a spring day caress its slopes. The mountain does not become arrogant. It simply stands. The hot, baking sun of summer beats down upon it. The mountain does not complain. It simply stands. The fierce, howling gales of autumn lash it with rain. The mountain is not intimidated. It simply stands. The deep, silent snows of winter blanket it in ice. The mountain is not defeated. It simply stands. It allows all the weather, the pleasant and the unpleasant, to happen. It provides the space for storms to rage and for sun to shine, but its own core, its immense grounded presence, is never disturbed. Its strength lies not in fighting the weather, but in its profound stillness. Through practice, our mind can develop this same mountainous quality. We can learn to sit with the changing weather of our own lives, with the storms of loss and the sunshine of joy, and remain steady, present, and at peace. This is not a far-off, unattainable goal. You can practice nurturing equanimity in your daily life. The next time you feel the sting of blame or the rush of praise, pause, take a breath, acknowledge the feeling, and then, in your mind, take a step back and whisper to yourself, "This is impermanent. This too shall pass." See the feeling as a cloud moving through the vast open sky of your mind. In doing this, you are choosing not to be the cloud, but to be the sky. As this quality of equanimity grows stronger, a surprising truth reveals itself. The mind that is balanced and peaceful within no longer desperately seeks stimulation and happiness from without. The frantic search for the next pleasure, the next purchase, the next validation begins to quiet down. We discover that we do not need nearly as much as we thought we did to be content. This discovery, that true wealth is not in having more, but in wanting less, is the gateway to a profound and joyful new way of living. It is the entrance to the freedom of simplicity. A mind established in equanimity that has found its center of gravity within begins to see the world through new eyes. It has discovered an inner wealth, a source of peace that cannot be bought or sold. This profound inner shift naturally leads to a questioning of the outer world, especially the relentless promise of modern culture that happiness is just one more purchase away. We are led, not by a sense of harsh duty, but by a joyful curiosity, into the great liberation of simplicity. From the moment we are born, we are immersed in a story, the story that more is better. A bigger house, a faster car, the latest technology, a more exotic vacation. We are told that these things will make us happy, secure, and complete. But if we look closely, with the mindful awareness we have been cultivating, we start to notice the hidden cost of this accumulation. Every object we own owns a piece of us. It occupies not just physical space in our homes, but mental space in our minds. A new car brings with it the fear of the first scratch, the burden of insurance payments, the anxiety of keeping it clean. A closet full of expensive clothes brings the pressure of wearing the right thing, of keeping up with trends. Our possessions, which promised freedom, often become our jailers. They are anchors that weigh us down, demanding our time, our energy, and our attention. There is a deep and revealing truth in the statement, as within, so without. A cluttered, chaotic home, filled with things we do not use or love, is often a direct reflection of a cluttered, chaotic mind. The mind that is filled with unresolved desires, anxieties, and attachments tends to manifest that same state in its physical environment. The opposite is also true. The act of simplifying our outer world can be a powerful catalyst for simplifying our inner world. To go through your home and intentionally let go of objects that no longer serve you is not just tidying up. It is a profound spiritual practice. Each item you pick up offers a chance for inquiry. Why am I holding on to this? What promise did I believe it held? Can I let it go now? With every object you release, you are not just creating physical space. You are practicing the art of non-clinging in a tangible way. You are loosening the grip of the past and the future, and choosing the freedom of the present moment. This can feel frightening at first, as if we are giving up parts of our identity. But soon, a surprising sense of lightness begins to emerge. It is the feeling of setting down a heavy bag you did not even realize you had been carrying. We must be clear. The path of simplicity is not a path of poverty or deprivation. It is not about self-punishment or a grim austerity. It is about consciously choosing a life of elegance and meaning over a life of excess and distraction. It is the cultivation of true wealth. True wealth is not having a house overflowing with things. It is having a mind free from the anxiety of wanting more. True wealth is not a schedule packed with important meetings and social obligations. It is having the time and freedom to take a long walk with no destination, or to have a deep, unhurried conversation with someone you love. A simple life is an intentional life. It is about curating your world, both inner and outer, so that it contains only what is essential, what is useful, and what is truly beautiful. It is the difference between a room stuffed with cheap, disposable furniture and a room containing a single, well-crafted chair that brings you joy every time you see it. It is about quality over quantity, meaning over multiplicity. This is not lack. This is abundance of a different, more satisfying kind. There is a timeless story that illuminates this understanding perfectly. A great and powerful king who lived in an opulent palace filled with unimaginable treasures, heard tales of a wise sage who lived in the nearby forest. Seeking wisdom, the king made the journey. He was shocked to find the sage living in a tiny bare hut. Inside, there was only a simple mat for sleeping, a clay pot for water, and a small stack of books. The king, accustomed to grandeur, looked around in disbelief. "Wise one," he said, "I have heard of your great wisdom, and yet you live with nothing. Where is all your furniture? Where are your possessions?" The sage smiled warmly at the king and asked a question in return. "Your Majesty, you have traveled a long way from your palace to be here. May I ask, where is your furniture? Where are your possessions?" The king laughed. I cannot bring my palace with me. I am a traveler on a journey. I carry only what is absolutely essential for the trip. The sage's smile widened, his eyes filled with a gentle light. As do I, Your Majesty, he replied softly. I too am just a traveler in this world, and these are the only things essential for my journey. This story strikes at the heart of our human condition. We are all temporary travelers here. We arrive with nothing, and we leave with nothing. The endless accumulation of things is a distraction from the journey itself. To travel light is to be free. The ultimate gift of this simplification is space. When you let go of the non-essential, you create space in your home, which brings a sense of calm and peace. When you let go of the frantic need to acquire and achieve, you create space in your schedule. This is not empty time to be filled with more distractions. It is sacred time. It is time to connect with yourself, with others, and with the natural world. Most importantly, when you simplify your life, you create space in your mind. With fewer desires pulling you in 1,000 directions, with fewer things to manage and worry about, the mind naturally becomes quieter. The constant, noisy chatter begins to subside. And in that newfound silence, something precious can finally be heard. The soft, subtle voice of your own inner wisdom, the quiet joy of simple presence. This is the freedom of simplicity. It is not a rule to be followed, but a joyful discovery to be made. It is the relief of realizing you are already enough. It is the deep contentment that arises from the single, beautiful word, enough. This embrace of a simple, uncluttered life is not an endpoint. It is not a static state of perfection we achieve one day. Rather, it is an ongoing practice, a continuous choice to turn away from the noise and toward the quiet. This very realization that our practice is not a race to a finish line leads us to our final and most integrating understanding that the path itself is the destination. We have walked a long and winding path together on this journey. We started with the raw ache of our own discontent. We explored the deep nature of reality. We learned to cultivate a compassionate heart and a quiet mind, and we discovered the surprising freedom that comes from a simple life. And now, we arrive at the final, and perhaps most liberating, understanding of all. In a culture obsessed with destinations, with goals, with finish lines and achievements, this final lesson asks us to lay down the very idea of arrival. It invites us to embrace the profound truth that the path is the goal. Our entire lives, we are trained to see the path as a mere inconvenience, a series of steps we must endure to get to the prize at the end. The years of study are a path to the degree. The long hours at work are a path to the promotion. The diet is a path to the desired body. We apply this same goal-oriented mindset to our spiritual lives. We think, if I meditate enough, I will achieve enlightenment. If I practice letting go, I will one day arrive at a state of perfect, unshakable peace. We treat the teachings, like the Eightfold Path, as a checklist to be completed, rather than a guide for living. We want to graduate from mindfulness, but the wisdom of this ancient path reveals the flaw in this approach. The Ba Chan Dao, the Eightfold Path, is not a ladder you climb and then kick away. It is a wheel, where each spoke supports all the others, and it is meant to turn, moment by moment, for our entire lives. You do not finish right mindfulness and move on. You simply practice being mindful, right now. You do not perfect, right intention, and receive a certificate. You simply set your intention with compassion, today, The path is not a means to an end. The very act of walking the path, of engaging with these principles in the messy, beautiful reality of our daily lives, is itself the goal. The point is not to arrive at a distant shore. The point is to learn how to navigate the waters of this very moment with grace and awareness. This understanding relieves us of an immense and subtle burden, the pressure of spiritual ambition. It frees us from the anxiety of, am I doing it right? Or, how much further do I have to go? It tells us that where we are right now is the perfect place to practice. There is no other place we need to be. Inevitably, on this walk, we will stumble. We are human. There will be days when we forget everything we have learned. The old habits of anger, of clinging, of judgment will reassert themselves with surprising force. We will find ourselves once again lost in the frantic story of me, tossed about by the 8 worldly winds. In these moments, it is easy to feel discouraged, to believe we have failed. But here lies the heart of the practice. The practice is not about never falling down. The practice is about how we get back up. The measure of our progress is not in achieving a perfect, uninterrupted state of peace. The measure of our progress is in the growing tenderness and lack of judgment with which we treat ourselves when we have strayed. Imagine a small child learning to walk. She pulls herself up, takes one wobbly step, and falls. She might cry for a moment, but she does not condemn herself. She does not declare, I am a failure at walking. I will never try again. She simply, instinctively, reaches for the table and pulls herself up once more. The joy of learning to walk is not reserved for the final moment of mastery. The joy is in the entire process, the falling and the rising, the wobbling and the balancing. We must learn to offer ourselves this same innocent and persistent compassion. When you notice you have been lost in anger for an hour, the practice is not to berate yourself for that hour. The practice is to celebrate the moment of remembering. Ah, I see. I was lost. And then, with the gentleness of a loving parent, you begin again. The joy is not in never falling. The joy is in learning how to stand up with a kinder heart each and every time. There is a classic Zen story that captures this truth with beautiful simplicity. A young, earnest student journeyed to a remote monastery to learn from a renowned master. After years of study, he felt he was close to a breakthrough. He approached the master and asked, "Master, tell me about your life. What did you do before you became enlightened?" The master, who was chopping firewood, paused and said, "Before I was enlightened, I chopped wood and I carried water from the well." The student considered this. It seemed so ordinary. He then asked, "So, what do you do now? Now that you are a great, enlightened master, how do you spend your days?" The master smiled, swung his axe, and cleanly split a log. "Now that I am enlightened," he said, "I chop wood and I carry water from the well." This is the great secret. The spiritual path does not necessarily take us away from the ordinary circumstances of our lives. We do not magically transcend the need to work, to eat, to wash the dishes, to care for our families. The outer world may look exactly the same. The transformation is entirely internal. It is in the quality of awareness we bring to our actions. Before enlightenment, chopping wood is a chore. The mind is elsewhere, complaining about the work, dreaming of the future, lost in 100 anxieties. But after enlightenment, chopping wood is everything. It is a complete and total meditation. There is the feeling of the axe handle in the hands, the sound of the blade splitting the wood, the rhythm of the body in motion. There is no separation. The sacred is not found by escaping our ordinary life. The sacred is found by being fully present for it. If the path is the goal, then the path is not some distant future, event. The path is this moment. The act of reading these words, the feeling of the air on your skin, the sounds in the room around you, this is the path. And the destination? It too must be here. And it is. The destination is your very next breath. Each inhalation is a fresh start, a new arrival. Each exhalation is a letting go, a release. The breath is the constant, faithful anchor that brings us home to the only moment that has ever existed, right now. You do not need to wait for a future moment of peace. Freedom is not a reward to be earned at the end of a long struggle. It is available to you right here, in the simple, profound act of being aware of your own life as it unfolds. This journey is not a race, it is a walk. And every single step along the way is a sacred arrival. This understanding allows us to finally relax, to let go of the striving, and to simply be with the rhythm of our own becoming, trusting that the very act of walking is all that is ever required. We began our journey together on the bank of a furious river, watching a man exhaust himself in a futile struggle to stop the current with his bare hands. He was soaked, weary, and trapped in a battle he could never win. A perfect mirror for our own struggle against the uncontrollable currents of life. Now, at the end of our path, let us return to that riverbank. The river itself has not changed. It still flows with the same relentless, powerful, and unpredictable force. But the man is different. He is no longer in the water, fighting and flailing. He is sitting peacefully on the shore. Perhaps there is even a faint smile on his face. He has not conquered the river. He has understood it. He has walked the path from diagnosing his own profound dissatisfaction to seeing its roots in his resistance to impermanence and his attachment to a fictional, solid self. He learned the tools of mindfulness and acceptance, not to defeat the river, but to change his relationship with it. He has practiced letting go of the past, releasing his anxiety about the future, and loosening his grip on the outcomes he once so desperately tried to control. He has, in short, laid down his arms. And so we arrive at the heart of it all. The deep, abiding peace you have been seeking is not, and never was, located in a world that has finally bent to your will. It is not a prize to be won at the end of a long and successful battle with reality. The river was never the enemy. The traffic jam, the difficult diagnosis, the opinion of another, the passage of time, itself. None of these were ever the true source of your suffering. The struggle was the suffering. The belief that the river should be other than what it is was the source of all your pain. The peace you seek is an inner spaciousness, a quiet clearing within you that has been there all along, waiting patiently beneath the noise of the battle. It is a quality of your own awareness, a stillness that can hold the entire, raging river without being swept away. This is the source of your empowerment. You do not need to move to a monastery or become someone other than who you are to find this peace. You have all the tools you need within you, right now. The breath you are breathing, the awareness that is reading these words, the heart that is capable of great compassion, especially for yourself. So the next time you feel that familiar tension rising, that urgent impulse to fix, to manage, to force, to control, you are invited to remember the man at the river. In that moment, simply pause. Take one conscious breath. In that breath, ask yourself, is this the river? Am I fighting the river? And then, with all the gentleness you can muster, ask the final question, can I, just for this moment, let it flow? The freedom you seek is born in the space of that question. The peace you crave is waiting in the stillness of your own heart.